Hi guys, and welcome to History That Makes You Sleepy Tonight. You arrive just a little too late. A thin layer of ash drifts slowly through the air, settling softly on your shoulders, light as snow but warmer than it should be. You brush it away without thinking, only to notice how quiet everything is. No footsteps, no distant voices, not even the sound of wind, just a stillness that feels unnatural. You take a slow breath, and there is a faint, bitter taste in the air. It lingers longer than expected. You pause, because something here does not quite make sense. And the more you notice, the clearer it becomes. If you were truly standing here, you would not have time to understand it. You probably would not survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and don't forget to share your location and local time in the comments. I always enjoy seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, flow straight into the story. You stand beside a shallow river crossing on a cold evening in the Western country, sometime in the broad and restless middle of the 19th century, when thousands of families moved by wagon toward Oregon, California, Utah, and places they have described so often that the names now sound less like geography and more like promises. The day is nearly gone. That is the problem. A covered wagon waits near the water, its white canvas dim in the fading light, though white is perhaps too generous. Trail canvas is rarely clean for long. It is dust-stained, smoke-tinted, rain-marked, and patched in places where brush, weather, or bad luck has chewed at it. The wagon bows curve above the wooden bed like ribs beneath a tired animal hide. The wheels are caked with mud. The tongue points toward the river as if the whole contraption still intends to move, even though every living thing around it seems to be asking the same quiet question. Do we cross now, or do we wait? You hear the river before you fully see it. It murmurs over stones with that deceptively gentle sound moving water likes to make when it is planning to ruin someone's evening. The surface looks dark, almost oily under the last blue light. Small rims of ice cling to the shallows. Along the banks, trampled reeds lie flat where other wagons have passed. Somewhere nearby, an ox exhales, a long cloudy breath drifting from its nostrils. Leather creaks. A chain knocks softly against wood. A child coughs from inside the wagon, then falls quiet. This is the hour when pioneer families begin to understand that cold is not just weather. It is a visitor. It arrives early, settles in confidently, and does not care whether you have finished your chores. During the great years of overland migration, many families travelled in wagon trains, rising before sunrise, moving for long hours, and stopping with enough daylight to tend animals, gather fuel, cook, mend, and prepare bedding. That is one plain fact of the trail, often less glamorous than the stories of mountain passes and buffalo herds, but far more important to nightly survival. Camp made too late is camp made badly. Camp made badly in freezing weather can become a long, miserable lesson in humility. And here you are, arriving too late. The family near the wagon has already begun the familiar argument that is not quite an argument, because everyone is too tired to spend words freely. The father stands near the lead oxen, one hand on a yoke, studying the river as though staring might make it lower. The mother is at the rear of the wagon, lifting a flap of canvas and looking inside at the bedding, the bundles, the tin cups, the flour sack. The children pressed among domestic treasures that seem necessary back home and now seem personally committed to being in the way. An older girl holds a lantern and tries to keep it shielded from the damp air. A younger boy stands with his hands tucked under his arms, performing that ancient human dance known as pretending not to be cold. You know the feeling. Your own breath fogs in front of you. The cold has a mineral sharpness to it, rising from the river stones and the exposed mud. It presses through sleeves, creeps around the collar, and settles at the wrists. You smell wet wool, animal sweat, wood smoke from another camp farther off, and the sour, honest odour of travel. Not heroic travel. Real travel. The kind involving damp socks and tired feet, and the strong suspicion that every blanket you own is somehow thinner than it was yesterday. The wagon's canvas shifts faintly. Not much wind, but enough. The sound is soft, a brushing sigh. It reminds you at once how fragile this shelter is. A covered wagon looks from a distance, almost like a small white room on wheels. Up close, it is a box with cloth over it. Useful cloth. Certainly, precious cloth. Cloth that keeps off sun, rain, dust, and some snow. But cloth all the same. Against a freezing night, canvas offers hope, not magic. A curious little trail belief, mentioned in different forms across frontier memory, is that some travellers thought hanging certain foods, charms, or strongly scented items near the wagon entrance could discourage pests, illness, or bad luck on hard nights. People are practical, yes, but they're also human. They tuck a child under a quilt and mutter a blessing. They trust a lucky coin, a Bible verse, a dried herb, a scrap of home. Is it science? Not exactly. Is it understandable completely? After 15 miles of mud, even a potato with a personality might begin to seem reassuring. The question at the crossing remains. If the family crosses now, the wagon wheels may sink, the oxen may stumble on unseen stones, the bedding may get splashed, and wet bedding and freezing weather is not an inconvenience. It is a threat, but if they wait, they camp beside water, where the air grows colder, damp rises from the banks, and frost forms early. The best camp spots may already be taken by those sensible people who stopped while the sun was still pretending to be useful. Researchers continue to debate how often emigrant families underestimated evening cold compared with more visible dangers like river crossings, disease, or accidents. Diaries often mention storms, sickness, and deaths with painful clarity. But ordinary cold sometimes appears only in passing, hidden inside brief notes about poor sleep, frozen clothing, or cattle hard to start in the morning. Yet those small lines matter. They are the history of bodies, not just routes. You step closer to the wagon, inside. The air is warmer only because several people have been breathing in it. The wagon bed smells of canvas, flour dust, old wood, damp wool, and faint smoke carried in from the cook fire that has not yet been made here. Quilts are rolled tight, a feather tick, lumpy and compressed from travel, lies beneath sacks and folded clothing. There are tools along one side, a skillet wrapped in cloth, a coffee pot darkened by many fires, and a small chest that probably contains things no one can afford to lose, although everyone has already lost plenty. A little girl peers out from under a shawl. Her cheeks are pink from cold. She watches you with the serious expression children wear when adults are trying not to frighten them. You hear the mother say, softly, that they cannot risk the dark water. The father says the bank may freeze harder by morning. The older girl says nothing, which may be the wisest contribution so far. Somewhere down the line, another wagon bell gives a dull clink. A man calls to an animal. The river keeps talking to itself. The family chooses to wait. It is not dramatic. No grand speech. No cinematic swell of strings. Unless the oxen are hiding a violin, which seems unlikely, and frankly would raise more questions than it answers. The decision happens in a few tired gestures. The father turns the team away from the river. The mother begins rearranging the wagon, interior for night. The older girl lifts the lantern. The boy is sent to look for wood, and he walks with the tragic slowness of a child who has just learned that being cold does not excuse him from chores. Now the evening changes shape. Survival will not depend on one heroic act. It will depend on many small ones, done in the right order, before darkness finishes closing its hand. The animals must be secured. A fire must be coaxed from reluctant fuel. Bedding must be kept dry. Supper must warm the body without using too much food. Children must be settled. Clothes must be layered. Wet items must be dried if they can be dried, ignored if they cannot, and cursed silently either way. You stand near the wagon as frost begins to silver the grass. The canvas glows faintly from the lantern within. It looks peaceful now, almost cosy, the way hardship sometimes does from a respectful distance. But inside that pale cover, the family is preparing for the oldest negotiation in human life, how to keep a little warmth around the body until morning. And as the river darkens beside you, as the first stars appear above the trail, you understand that the cold night has only just begun. The wagon is turned a little away from the river now, angled so the rear opening faces the dim rise of the bank rather than the black water. It is a small adjustment, almost laughably small. But on a freezing night, small things develop enormous opinions. A few feet of distance from damp air, a slightly better shield from the breeze, a bit of canvas pulled tighter on one side than the other. None of it feels heroic, yet all of it matters. You climb carefully into the wagon, one hand on the sideboard, one foot searching for a place that is not already occupied by somebody's bundle, somebody's boot, or somebody's entire exhausted personality. The wooden bed gives a faint groan beneath your weight. Inside, the space is narrower than memory likes to imagine. Paintings and films often make covered wagons seem almost roomy, like a charming mobile cottage for people with excellent cheekbones and suspiciously clean aprons. Reality is less generous. A typical emigrant wagon was often about 10 feet long and 4 feet wide in the bed. Those sizes varied, and families had to fit tools, food, bedding, clothing, cookware, keepsakes, and sometimes children inside that crowded frame. The people themselves often walked beside it during the day, partly because the wagon was already carrying everything else. Now, at night, the wagon becomes shelter. You sit with your knees drawn in, close enough to feel the warmth of another shoulder through layers of cloth. The canvas above you curves overhead, low and pale, its inner surface darkened in places by old smoke and weather stains. You can see tiny pinpricks where light from the lantern catches weak places in the weave. The canvas is not a wall. It is a promise trying its best. The mother works by habit. She pulls bedding from beneath a sack of flour and shakes it loose with careful, tired motions. The quilt opens across the wagon bed in soft folds, smelling faintly of smoke, wool, and the human effort of keeping something clean while crossing a continent made mostly of dust, mud, and inconvenience. A second quilt follows, then a coat, then shawls, then a folded piece of canvas kept for covering goods but now promoted temporarily to the rank of family comfort. The older girl reaches up to check the wagon cover. Her fingers move along the seam where the canvas is tied to the bows. She tightens a cord, then another. Outside, the father is doing the same, pulling the side ropes snug and lowering the canvas flap over the rear opening. Every gap is a mouth for cold air. Every loose edge may chatter all night and let frost creep in. If there is a tear, it must be patched or weighted down. If there is sag, snow or freezing rain may collect there. A wagon cover needs tending the way a fire needs tending. It is not something you own once. It is something you keep persuading to function. A small boy pushes himself into the bedding and immediately gets told not to lie down yet. This is cruel, of course, because lying down is the entire point of existence when you're cold and tired. But there are rules. Boots must be checked. Wet socks must come off. Crumbs must be brushed away before they become tomorrow's mystery. The youngest child must be tucked where she will not roll against the sideboard and wake everyone with a thump. The coffee pot must not be kicked. The lantern must not be knocked over. Humanity, you notice, has always required logistics. The air inside the wagon warms by inches, though it never becomes truly warm. It is the difference between cold that bites directly and cold that waits politely before biting. The canvas blocks the strongest drafts, but it does not hold heat like a cabin wall. There is no stove inside most covered wagons used for ordinary overland travel, no snug hearth, no chimney, no private little room glowing with comfort. Fire belongs outside, because sparks and dry canvas are not a combination anyone wants to test after a long day. So the family borrows warmth from bodies, bedding, hot food, wrapped stones if they have them, and the fading heat stored in wool. A less common frontier notion appears in some memories, and later family tales. People sometimes believed that sleeping with the head pointed a particular direction could affect health, dreams, or luck on the road, north for strength, east for blessing, away from the river for safety. Such ideas varied wildly, and you can almost hear a tired grandmother insisting that she knows what works, because she has survived long enough to become difficult to argue with. In truth, the practical direction usually wins. You sleep where there is space. Philosophy surrenders to the flour barrel. The father lifts the rear flap and leans in. Cold air slides round him at once, sharp and wet from the river. He passes in an armful of coats and a small bundle wrapped in cloth. The mother takes them without comment. He looks over the arrangement, measuring with his eyes who will fit where. In this quiet moment, you can see how family order becomes heat order. The smallest children go toward the centre. Older children form the next layer. Adults take the colder edges, because that is what adults do and then pretend was their plan all along. Scholars have long discussed whether emigrant diaries understate the labour of making nightly shelter, because it was so routine that writers hardly bothered to describe it. A broken axle or dangerous crossing earned ink. A mother rearranging bedding for the 9th freezing night in a row often did not. Yet routine does not mean easy. It means necessary. It means repeated until the body performs it even when the mind has gone soft with exhaustion. You feel the wooden bed beneath the bedding. It is hard and cold, carrying the chill of the evening. The family lays down whatever they can spare between bodies and boards. Quilts, spare clothing, a folded blanket, a sack that once held grain. In good conditions, a feather tick or straw mattress might soften the wagon bed. But overland travel is not kind to comfort. Feathers compress. Straw gets damp. Bedding absorbs smoke and sweat and the sadness of being shaken out every morning before a person has properly returned to life. Outside, the fire is beginning to catch. You can smell it before you see its light through the flap. Willow, perhaps. Cottonwood. Something gathered quickly and not quite dry, giving off more smoke than flame. The smoke threads under the canvas edge and settles into the wagon smell. No one seems surprised. Smoke is practically another family member on the trail. Not loved, exactly, but always present at meals. The mother tucks a shawl along one side of the wagon, where the canvas doesn't meet snugly. It is a humble bit of insulation, but it slows the draft. The older girl presses a rolled coat near the tailgate. Another gap softened. Another small victory. You notice the sound of the canvas changing as the night deepens. Earlier it sighed. Now it stiffens faintly. The fabric growing colder, tighter, less forgiving. Frost will form on the outside before long. If breath condenses inside, it may dampen the bedding near the edges. Warmth always comes with a bill. The children settle at last. One whispers that the wagon feels like a cave. Another says caves probably do not have wheels. This is fair. The boy complains that someone's elbow is in his ribs. Someone replies that his ribs should move. A tiny domestic negotiation follows, conducted in murmurs, sighs, and the soft rustling of quilts. You sit among them, listening. The river speaks beyond the canvas. The oxen shift in the dark. The father steps away to tend the fire, and the rear flap falls closed again, leaving the wagon dim and close. The lantern flame trembles. Shadows move gently across the curved cover above you. This is the truth of the covered wagon at night. It is not a fortress against winter. It is a fragile pocket of order in a large cold world. Its canvas walls cannot defeat freezing air, but they can slow it. Its bedding cannot create summer, but it can hold the family's warmth close enough to last a few more hours. Its cramped discomfort becomes protection, because every shoulder, every tucked foot, every shared quilt turns separate bodies into one small sleeping arrangement with a single purpose. Morning is still far away, the river crossing is waiting, the frost is gathering, but for now, inside the wagon's thin comfort, the family begins the long work of staying warm by remaining near one another. The fire begins as a disappointment, which is often how important things begin. A few scraps of dry grass curl beneath a handful of twigs, and for a moment there is only smoke. It seeps low over the ground, thin and grey, making everyone's eyes water in a very democratic way. The father crouches close, his hat brim pulled down, one hand cupped around the little nest of kindling as if protecting a shy animal. The older boy kneels beside him, trying to look useful without breathing directly into the smoke. This is difficult, because smoke on the trail has a special talent for finding the nearest face and entering it personally. You stand just beyond them, feeling the cold slide around your ankles. The riverbank is damp, and the frost has begun to strengthen on the grass. Each blade catches the lantern light in a silver edge. The wagon waits behind you, pale and curved under the darkening sky, its canvas drawn tight now, holding the family's small pocket of warmth as best it can. But inside, warmth will not last long unless the fire outside grows into something steady enough to cook by, dry by, and borrow courage from. The father strikes flint again, or perhaps uses a coal carried carefully from an earlier flame, depending on what the family has managed to preserve. Many overland travellers guarded fire as a valuable resource, carrying embers in covered containers when they could, because starting fresh flame in wet, windy, freezing conditions could become a miserable task. Matches existed in the 19th century, but they were not always cheap, reliable, or plentiful in every wagon, and a careless family could use them faster than expected. So fire was treated less like a convenience, and more like a travelling companion with a difficult mood. At last, a tiny orange tongue appears under the grass. It flickers once, vanishes, then returns. Everyone leans closer without meaning to. There is something ancient in that movement. People may disagree about routes, river crossings, camp rules, and whether the youngest child has been wearing the same sock for too many days. But when flame appears in the cold, every face turns toward it. The older girl arrives with more twigs gathered from a dry patch beneath brush. She holds them out with the seriousness of someone presenting treasure. The mother steps from the wagon carrying a tin cup, a small cloth bundle, and the expression of a person already calculating supper, bedding, children, and tomorrow before anyone else has finished thinking about tonight. She glances at the fire, then at the wood pile, which is not really a pile. It is a suggestion. Fuel is one of the great quiet problems of the trail. In wooded regions, families could gather fallen branches, chips, bark, and brush. On open plains, they often relied on buffalo chips, dried animal dung that burned surprisingly well when cured by sun and wind. That is a true and very practical detail of overland life, though it does make you appreciate the phrase home cooking in a more complicated way. Dried dung could provide heat for boiling coffee, frying bacon, or baking quick bread. And many travellers mention using it with a matter-of-fact tone. Nothing lowers romantic illusions quite like discovering that dinner depends on carefully selected prairie manure. Tonight, near the river, the family has some brush, a few damp branches and bits saved from earlier. The father arranges the smallest pieces first. The flame climbs slowly, crackling through twigs. Smoke thickens, then thins as the heat improves. The smell changes from wet sourness to sharper wood smoke. Sparks lift and vanish into the dark. You feel it now, the first warmth against your hands. Not enough to heat your whole body, not yet, but enough to make your palms ache as the blood returns toward the surface. You hold them out carefully, then turn them, warming one side, then the other, performing the universal campfire gesture known to every cold person since before history learned to write anything down. The children emerge one by one from the wagon, wrapped in shawls and coats, drawn by the light. The smallest child stays near the rear flap, half inside, half outside, as if negotiating with the temperature. The boy who gathered wood looks proud for approximately 3 seconds, then begins complaining that his fingers hurt. His mother takes his hands between hers and rubs them briskly. It is tender, but efficient. Frontier affection often has excellent technique and very little ceremony, a curious camp belief, sometimes found in old family lore, held that banking a fire in a certain shape could help protect a campsite from bad luck. Wandering animals, or night spirits, a ring of stones, a crosswise stick, an ember left glowing in the direction of the morning. Practical people may have laughed at such ideas in daylight, then arranged the coals just so after dark. The trail did not make people less imaginative. It gave imagination more shadows to work with. The fire grows. The father places larger sticks across the coals. Careful not to smother the centre, a small iron skillet appears. The coffee pot is filled with river water that will need a hard boil, because no one on this road has the luxury of trusting water merely because it looks poetic in moonlight. The mother opens the cloth bundle, cornmeal, perhaps, a little flour, a pinch of salt, something simple that can become supper if treated kindly. The scent of smoke settles into everything: hair, cuffs, quilts, wagon canvas, even memory. You notice how the family gathers around the fire but does not waste it. They do not sit with dreamy leisure, staring into flames for hours like people in a painting titled Peaceful Frontier Evening. They work in its orbit. Socks are checked. Damp hems are held near heat, but not too near. A child's mittens are draped over a stick. The mother warms a cup before filling it. The father watches the sparks, because one careless gust could send fire toward grass, canvas, or bedding. Comfort is useful. Comfort is also supervised. Specialists in Western migration still disagree about how much nightly camp routine varied by region, class, season, and experience. Some families carried careful habits from farm life and adapted quickly. Others learned by mistakes, sometimes cold ones. A traveller who knew how to build a fire in a rainy woodland might not understand prairie fuel at first. A family used to a hearth might struggle with open flame in wind. The trail was not one experience but thousands of adjustments made by tired hands under changing skies. The coffee begins to heat. Its smell rises dark and bitter, mingling with smoke. Even if children do not drink much of it, the adults lean toward that scent as if it has medicinal authority. Coffee on the trail is comfort, stimulant, ritual, and mild illusion all at once. It says the day has been survived. It says there may still be enough order in the universe to boil water and call it a beverage, The firelight touches the wagon wheels, the oxen's legs, the faces of the family. It makes the river beyond seem even darker. The animals stand close enough to be seen, but far enough to avoid sparks. Their breath clouds softly. Harness leather hangs stiff. Metal fittings catch small flashes of orange. Everything outside the circle of light becomes uncertain. This is why fire matters before full darkness. Not only for heat, not only for food. Fire draws a boundary. Here is the camp. Here are the people. Here are the hands, the cups, the quilts, the damp socks, the weary jokes, the ordinary stubbornness of staying alive. Beyond this glow lies river mist, frozen grass, strange sounds, and the long road still waiting. But within it, for a little while, the family has a centre. The mother passes a warm cup to the father. He takes it with both hands. The boy's mittens steam faintly. The smallest child yawns so widely that her whole face seems surprised by it. Someone laughs softly, not much, but enough. The flames settle into coals. Steady now, red at the heart. Supper can begin. Bedding can be warmed by proximity. Clothes can dry a little. The night is not defeated. Of course, the night is patient, but the family has answered it with flame, and that answer is glowing in the cold. The fire has settled into a red heart of coals, and the family begins the careful ritual of putting warmth onto the body before sleep. Not just one coat thrown over tired shoulders, not just a blanket dragged from the wagon with a hopeful sigh. No, this is a quieter and more deliberate art, learned through discomfort, corrected by frost, and remembered by every finger that has ever gone numb at the wrong time. You stand near the wagon as the mother sorts garments in the lantern glow. Wool shawls, linen shirts, heavy stockings, a patched coat with elbows gone shiny from years of use, a child's small cap stretched at the edge, mittens that do not match, a scarf that may once have been handsome but now mostly looks experienced. Each piece has a purpose, each layer traps a little air, and trapped air is the secret treasure of cold weather clothing. The pioneers may not explain it with modern science while crouching beside a smoky fire and wondering whether the coffee will taste like river mud, but their bodies understand it. Wool matters most. That is one ordinary but essential fact of frontier life. Wool could keep some warmth even when damp, unlike cotton or linen, which tended to cling coldly when wet. Many travellers wore linen underlayers because linen was common and durable, but wool outer garments, wool socks, wool blankets, and knitted caps were precious when temperatures dropped. A family might not have enough of them. That shortage shaped every evening decision. The mother lifts the youngest child's arms and slides another garment over her head. The child emerges with her hair standing in wild wisps, blinking as if she's been reborn into a slightly itchier world. She complains that the wool scratches. The mother says it means the wool is working. This may not be medically exact, but it has the tone of parental truth, which is often more powerful than evidence at bedtime. You feel your own layers differently now. The shirt closest to your skin is not meant to be impressive. It is meant to keep the rougher outer clothing away from you and hold a little warmth near the body. Over it comes heavier cloth, then perhaps a waistcoat, a coat, a shawl, a blanket if you are lucky. The cold still finds paths. It enters at the neck, the wrist, the gap between sock and trouser. The place where a coat button is missing, and everyone has been meaning to fix it since Missouri. There is no single perfect outfit. There's only the ongoing negotiation between what is dry, what is available, what fits, and what has not already been claimed by someone smaller, older, sicker, or louder. The father steps closer to the fire and turns slowly, warming the back of his coat. He does not stand too close, because sparks can burn holes in wool or canvas, and burned holes become tomorrow's drafts. The older boy holds his stockings near the heat and is warned again not to scorch them. The warning carries the tired flavour of having been given before. He nods solemnly, then moves them a little closer anyway, because children have always contributed to history by testing the limits of good advice. A peculiar old notion travelled in some rural households that red flannel worn near the chest could guard against chills, weakness, or winter illness. Red flannel appears in folk medicine across many communities, sometimes tied to warmth, circulation, or simply the comforting authority of a bright colour in a grey season. Did it cure anything special? Probably not in the way believers imagined. Did it keep a person warmer than no flannel at all? Absolutely, and sometimes that is enough for a belief to earn a long life. The older girl wraps a shawl around her shoulders and pins it close. She moves with the calm efficiency of someone who has learned that loose cloth is a problem waiting to happen. Loose cloth catches on corners, falls into ashes, lets cold air underneath, or slips away just when sleep begins. She tucks the end under her arm and reaches for the smallest child's cap. The child tries to avoid it. The cap wins. You notice how heat is shared without announcement. A mother's hands warm a child's fingers. A father gives his thicker gloves to a son who must help later with the animals. The older girl takes the thinner blanket and says she's fine. She's probably not fine. But fine is one of history's most overworked words. In a cramped wagon, comfort is not distributed by fairness alone. It is distributed by need, duty, habit, age, and love. Some historians question how much clothing pioneer families actually carried, compared with what later nostalgic images suggest. Romantic pictures show tidy layers and sturdy garments, but diaries and packing guides reveal a harder balance. Clothing was heavy, space was limited, fabric wore out. Families discarded belongings along the route when teams weakened or roads grew brutal. A woman might begin the journey with carefully packed garments and end it mending the same tired dress by firelight, while children wore patched sleeves and stockings darned into complicated little maps. The mother checks the boy's feet. Feet are serious business. Cold feet can ruin sleep with astonishing efficiency. Wet feet can become dangerous. Socks must be changed if dry ones exist. If not, damp socks are warmed, rubbed, and endured. Shoes and boots are set near heat, but not so near that leather stiffens, cracks, or shrinks. The smell rising from them is not charming. It is the smell of miles, mud, sweat, and the honest democracy of feet. No museum display ever quite captures it. And perhaps that is merciful. Inside the wagon, bedding is opened again. A quilt becomes not just a cover, but another layer of clothing for the entire family. Coats are laid across the foot of the sleeping space. Shawls fill gaps. A spare skirt becomes insulation. A folded coat becomes a pillow for one child and a shoulder cover for another. The line between clothing and bedding fades. Everything soft and warm joins the same cause. You climb in after them, feeling the difference between standing near the fire and entering the canvas shelter. The air inside is still cold, but it is calmer. The family brings heat with them, carried in cloth, skin, breath, and food. The mother makes everyone settle before the warmth escapes. There is a strategy to the order. The smallest children are placed where the most bodies surround them. Adults take the edges. Older children become buffers. Nobody calls it engineering, but it is. The youngest child curls against her sister, who pretends to be annoyed and then pulls the quilt higher. The boy keeps his hands tucked inside his sleeves. The father, still outside for the moment, shakes frost from a blanket before passing it in. It smells of smoke and cold air. The mother spreads it over the others, pressing it down along the sides as if sealing a pie crust, though sadly no pie is involved, a fact worth mourning quietly. Your own body begins to understand the layering. Warmth does not arrive all at once, it gathers. First at the chest, where cloth lies thick, then under the arms, then around the knees where the quilt folds. Fingers take longer, toes longer still. Breath warms the space near your face, then vanishes into canvas and night. The wagon creaks as someone shifts. A child whispers that the wool still scratches. The mother whispers back that scratching means you're alive enough to notice, which is not the most comforting bedtime philosophy ever invented, but it does have frontier logic. Outside, the river darkens under the stars. The fire falls lower. Inside, the family becomes a bundle of layers, each person wrapped in cloth and in one another's warmth. Linen, wool, buckskin, shawl, coat, quilt, breath, body. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is purely personal now. Warmth belongs to the group, and the group survives by holding it close. Inside the wagon, the family begins the delicate work of fitting too many human beings into too little space without causing a civil war before dawn. The arrangement looks simple from outside. A covered wagon rests beside the river. Canvas glows faintly from a lantern. Smoke drifts low over the camp. Animals stand in the dark. All very peaceful, very historical, very suitable for a painting in which nobody has elbows. But inside, where you are now wedged between bedding, bundles, and a child who has somehow become all knees, the truth is much less graceful. The wagon bed is not a bedroom. It is a storage box that has agreed, under pressure, to become a bedroom for one night. Along one side sits a chest with iron corners. Near it are sacks of flour and meal, wrapped carefully because food is hope with a drawstring. A skillet lies flat beneath a folded blanket. A small wooden bucket occupies a place everyone would like to put a foot. Coats are rolled into pillows. Extra canvas is tucked near the tailgate. Somewhere in the shadows, a spoon slides whenever the wagon shifts, making a tiny accusing sound. You lower yourself slowly into the bedding, trying not to press your boot against anything breakable or anyone emotional. The mother directs the final positions with quiet authority. Youngest child in the centre, older girl beside her, boy at the foot, though he claims the foot is not large enough for his feet, which is probably true but not useful. The mother takes one colder edge. The father, once he comes in from checking the animals, will take the other, or sleep half sitting near the opening if needed. Comfort is not assigned by rank. It is assigned by who can endure the worst place and complain the least. Many emigrant families did not ride comfortably inside their wagons for most of the day. A common reality of the overland trails was that adults and older children often walked beside the wagon, while supplies took up the space. The wagon carried flour, bacon, tools, spare parts, bedding, medicine, clothing, cookware, weapons, and whatever treasured items had survived the painful process of leaving home. At night, all of that did not vanish. It simply had to be rearranged around sleeping bodies, as if the family were solving a puzzle designed by a tired carpenter with a grudge. The youngest child is told to lie still. She immediately asks what counts as still. This is a dangerous philosophical question in a wagon. The older girl pulls the quilt up under the child's chin and turns her own face toward the canvas wall. Her breath appears faintly in the dim air. The boy tucks his hands inside his sleeves again, then pulls his knees closer. His feet press against a sack. The sack gives a soft crunch. Everyone freezes. The mother listens. No disaster follows. The family exhales. Because on the trail, even a crushed sack can feel like an event. There are layers beneath you, but not enough softness to disguise the boards completely. A blanket folded twice helps. A coat under the hip helps. A quilt over the legs helps. yet the body knows. Shoulders meet hard wood, ankles find corners. The ribs of the wagon seem to guide the cold downward. The space smells of wool, smoke, flour, leather, damp socks, and that close human scent that builds when people sleep in small shelters and pretend not to notice. A strange little piece of trail folklore claimed that if a spoon, knife, or other metal object kept sliding in the wagon at night, it meant weather would change before morning. Perhaps it was only that damp air and shifting ground made wood swell, canvas tighten, and wagons creak in new ways. Perhaps the spoon was not forecasting anything and simply wished to be annoying. Still, in the dark, people listen to small sounds and give them meaning. A restless spoon can become a weather prophet if everyone is tired enough. The father lifts the canvas flap and climbs in at last, bringing cold with him like an unwelcome relative. The whole wagon shifts. Someone's knee moves into your thigh. The boy mutters. The mother tells him softly to hush. The father lowers himself near the rear, not fully stretched out, because there is nowhere for full stretching unless one has been born unusually compact. He smells of smoke, oxen, cold leather, and river mist. His hands are rough and chilled. He rubs them once, then tucks them beneath his arms. The lantern is turned low, shadows soften. Outside, the fire gives a small pop, and the oxen shift their weight. The river speaks steadily beyond the canvas. You realize that the wagon is not silent. It never becomes silent. Wood creaks as bodies settle. Canvas ticks faintly where frost tightens it. Blankets rustle. Someone sniffles. Someone swallows. The father breathes slowly through his nose, trying not to cough from the smoke. A child's stomach growls. Then another answers, as if the family is keeping livestock inside as well as outside. Writers of migration history have often examined whether the wagon should be understood as a symbol of opportunity or as evidence of severe domestic strain. The popular image makes it a noble little ark rolling west. The lived experience was more complicated. The same wagon that carried a family's future also compressed its privacy, exposed its fatigue, and turned ordinary habits into public negotiations. Where do you change clothing? Where does a sick child lie? Who gets the dry side? Who stays awake when everyone wants to sleep? These questions rarely fit neatly into heroic paintings. The mother reaches across you to tuck a blanket edge beneath the smallest child. Her hand is cold, but her movement is practiced. She smooths the quilt with 2 firm strokes, then presses a coat over the children's feet. Shared warmth works best when no one creates gaps. A loose quilt edge can spill heat into the wagon's cold corners. A child who kicks can undo half an hour of careful arrangement. This is why Bedtime on the Trail includes not only affection, but also strategy, mild threats, and the ancient parental phrase of "stop moving." The boy whispers that he cannot sleep because his nose is cold. The father answers that noses are made for hardship. This is not helpful, but it is the kind of statement a father produces when the better solution would require owning a spare warm nose. The mother offers the boy a corner of shawl to pull nearer his face. He accepts it with the dignity of a person who's suffered greatly. You lie still, listening to the family become one crowded shape. It is uncomfortable. Yes, but the crowding also protects them. Bodies share heat. Breath warms the air beneath the quilts. Children nestled between older bodies lose less warmth to the wagon walls. The lack of room, which seemed almost comic a moment ago, now reveals its practical side. Space is pleasant in summer, in a freezing wagon. Closeness is insulation. Outside, the cold deepens. Frost strengthens on the grass. The river crossing waits unseen, but inside the wagon, among trunks, tools, sacks, quilts, and half-whispered complaints, the family has made a sleeping chamber from disorder. It is cramped. It is smoky. It is full of elbows, cold noses, and a spoon with suspicious ambitions. Yet it holds. And for tonight, holding is enough. The cold beneath the wheels is quieter than the wind, quieter than the river, quieter than the little spoon that still seems determined to announce itself whenever someone breathes too deeply. Yet it may be the most stubborn cold of all. You feel it through the bedding first as a dull pressure along your hip and shoulder. The quilts above you are doing their loyal work. The bodies beside you are slowly warming the shared space. The canvas cover has settled into a pale curve overhead, and the lantern is now only a faint amber pulse near the rear flap. But underneath everything, beneath the coat, beneath the blanket, beneath the compressed feather tick, the wagon bed holds the chill of the night like a grudge. Wood feels solid. Wood feels familiar. It seems as though it ought to protect you. But a wagon bed is not a warm floor in a house, and certainly not a mattress in a bedroom where nobody has recently discussed whether dried animal dung counts as fuel. The boards have been exposed all day to air, mud, river damp, and falling temperature. They're connected to the frame, to the wheels, to the cold metal fittings, to the frozen ground below. Slowly, patiently, they draw heat away from every warm body lying above them. This is one of those ordinary physical facts that pioneer families learned without needing a textbook. Warmth rises, yes, but warmth also escapes wherever cold surfaces touch the body. People sleeping directly on hard, cold boards lose comfort quickly, especially when bedding has been flattened by travel. So families used whatever they had to create separation: folded quilts, extra clothing, straw ticks, buffalo robes when available, grain sacks, spare canvas, even empty sacks stuffed with dry grass. If dry grass could be found, and if no one minded waking up smelling faintly like a barn with ambitions. Tonight, this family has layered the bottom as best they can. A folded blanket lies beneath the children. A coat protects the mother's side. A sack filled with clothing cushions the boy's feet. The father has accepted the least comfortable place near the edge, where the boards meet the side and the cold gathers like it has paid rent. You notice how he shifts once, slowly, then stops. Movement lets warm air out from under the covers. Stillness is part of survival, even when stillness makes every sore muscle file a formal complaint. Outside, frost thickens under the wagon. You cannot see it clearly, but you can imagine it forming on the ground between the wheels, silvering mud, grass, and the impressions left by boots. The wheels themselves stand dark and stiff. Iron tires around the wooden rims hold the cold with special enthusiasm. Metal always seems delighted to become freezing. Touch it with bare fingers and it will introduce itself immediately. A lesser-known belief among some travellers and rural families held that placing evergreen branches, sage, or other aromatic plants beneath bedding could help keep away chill, insects, or bad air. Sometimes the scent may have been pleasant. Sometimes the plants may have added a small layer of insulation. Sometimes, let us be honest, people probably just wanted the wagon to smell less like damp socks and tired humanity. A handful of fragrant brush can feel like luxury when your bedroom also contains flour sacks, tools, and a boy insisting his feet are being personally attacked by winter. The mother reaches down in the darkness and presses the bedding near the youngest child's back. She feels for gaps. Her hand moves along the edge where the blanket has folded under itself. A pocket of cold air has slipped in near the sideboard. She tucks it closed. The motion is small, almost invisible, but it matters. The cold beneath does not need much invitation. A loose fold, a thin place, a child's restless foot kicking away the lower quilt, and the warmth begins to drain. You listen to the wagon settle, A tiny creak passes through the boards, then another. The family's not moving, but the wagon seems to breathe with them, answering each shift of weight. The wood has known sun, rain, dust, and river crossings. It has carried barrels, bedding, iron tools, sacks of meal, perhaps a cherished chair abandoned somewhere miles back when the team grew tired. Now it carries sleep. Poorly, perhaps, but sincerely. Researchers continue to examine whether emigrants were more vulnerable to cold from poor ground insulation than many later accounts suggest. Diaries often mention snow, wind, hunger, or illness. But the simple misery of sleeping on cold surfaces may hide behind brief phrases like slept badly or froze hard last night. Modern readers can slide past those words too quickly. But if you have ever woken on a cold floor, even indoors, you know that bad sleep is not a small thing. On the trail, bad sleep becomes weak hands in the morning, slower packing, more mistakes, shorter tempers, and a family that has to meet the next day already tired. The boy at the foot of the bedding begins to wiggle. The mother whispers his name, low and warning. He whispers back that the boards are cold through his blanket. No one argues. Everyone knows. The older girl, without opening her eyes, nudges a folded shawl toward him with her foot. He drags it under his legs and sighs as if civilization has been restored. You think of other materials that might have helped. A thick buffalo robe, heavy and warm, could make an enormous difference. Some travellers acquired robes through trade or hunting, and they were valued for bedding and wraps. But robes were bulky, and not every family had them. Straw could insulate, but it had to be dry and renewed. Feather bedding was warm, yet it compressed under weight and could become damp. Every solution carried its own inconvenience, because the trail had a special talent for making comfort complicated. The canvas above gives a faint snap. Frost has stiffened it. A tiny draft slips along the side where the cover meets the wagon bed. It passes over your cheek and disappears under the quilt, like a very rude ghost. You pull the bedding closer. The air near your face is cool, but beneath the covers a pocket of warmth has formed. It smells of wool, smoke, and sleeping people. Not elegant, very useful. The father murmurs that he will check the animals before the moon climbs higher. The mother says not yet, just rest. Her voice is soft, but it has weight. He obeys for now, which may be the surest proof of exhaustion. Outside, an ox shifts, chain clinking once. The sound travels through the ground, into the wheels, into the wagon frame. You feel it faintly under your shoulder. That is the strange intimacy of the wagon. The family is not separate from the road, even in sleep. The ground speaks through wheels. The cold climbs through boards. The river damp presses against canvas. The animals move, and the shelter answers. There is no true inside. Not the way there would be in a cabin with chinked walls and a hearth. There is only a temporary inside, assembled from cloth, wood, bedding, and trust. Slowly, the shared warmth improves. The children stop moving. The boy's breathing lengthens. The youngest child makes a small humming sound in sleep, perhaps dreaming of a house with a floor that does not steal warmth like a polite thief. The mother's hand rests near the quilt edge, ready even in sleep to tuck, pull, smooth, and repair. The father lies still at the outer edge, a human barrier between his family and the cold boards beside him. Below, the wheels stand silent in frost. The wagon bed remains cold, but the layers hold, not perfectly, never perfectly, yet enough. And tonight, as the river waits and the fire outside fades into coals, enough is the difference between shivering until dawn and slipping, at last, into uneasy sleep. By the time supper begins, The cold has become a presence with its own seat at the fire. It waits beside the mother as she bends over the skillet. It clings to the father's coat when he returns from checking the oxen. It slips under cuffs, settles behind knees, and rests on the backs of hands. It listens, perhaps with smug interest. While the family tries to answer it with food, the coals glow low and steady now. A few small flames move along the edge of a stick, blue at the base and orange above, whispering through bark that is still a little damp. Smoke leans toward the wagon, because smoke has never respected personal boundaries. The mother holds the skillet over the heat and stirs something thick and pale. Cornmeal, perhaps, loosened with water and a little salt. It is not luxurious. It will not appear in a cookbook with a dramatic title and a photograph of rosemary scattered over a rustic table. But it is warm, and warmth that can be swallowed is a serious kind of comfort. You stand close enough to feel the fire on your shins. The smell of cooking rises slowly. Cornmeal, smoke, coffee, bacon grease saved from an earlier meal. The grease melts into the pan and sends up a richer scent, one that makes every stomach nearby remember it has been working all day on far too little praise. The boy watches the skillet with solemn attention. The youngest child leans against the older girl and asks whether supper is ready. The answer is not yet. This is the cruelest phrase in any century. Food on the overland trails was often plain, repetitive, and chosen for durability rather than pleasure. Families carried flour, cornmeal, bacon, beans, rice, coffee, sugar if they could afford it, dried fruit, and sometimes hard bread or crackers. Fresh meat depended on hunting, trade, or luck. Fresh vegetables became scarce. In cold weather, calories mattered even more, because the body burned energy to stay warm through long nights. A thin supper could mean more shivering before dawn. The mother scrapes the skillet with a spoon. The sound is soft but sharp in the cold air. She does not waste anything. A smear of grease is useful. A crusted edge can be softened. A spoonful stuck to the pan belongs to someone if it can be pried loose without losing dignity. The father pours coffee from the blackened pot into tin cups. Steam rises, fragrant and bitter. He hands the first cup to the mother, and she takes a small sip before returning to the pan. This is not ceremony. It is fuel delivered to the person currently keeping everyone else alive. A small, odd belief found in some frontier households held that a hot drink before sleep could warm the feet faster if the cup was held in both hands while drinking. Of course, the hands warmed because the cup was hot, and the feet warmed because the body was receiving heat and people were finally sitting down. But the idea has charming confidence. Hold the cup correctly, and your toes will negotiate peace with winter. Honestly, after a long day on the trail, you can see why such a theory might gain supporters. The mother serves the children first. A wooden bowl is passed carefully, then another. The food is thick enough to cling to the spoon, hot enough to make the children blow over it in little clouds. The youngest takes a bite too quickly and opens her mouth in silent alarm. The older girl tells her to breathe. The boy says he would have known to wait, which is bold from a person who once tried to dry stockings by nearly roasting them. No one mentions this. The night is cold enough without reopening old legal cases. You accept a portion and feel the warmth of the bowl through your fingers. The food tastes simple, smoky, salty, faintly sweet from the grain. It spreads heat through the mouth and throat, then downward into the chest. It does not erase the cold, but it gives the body something to work with. The stomach, that ancient furnace, receives its assignment and begins. Discussions among scholars of migration often ask how much hunger shaped emotional memory of the trail compared with fear, distance, or weather. Many diaries mention food only briefly, as though meals were too ordinary to deserve description. Yet shortages, spoiled supplies, and monotonous diets shape morale every day. A warm supper could soften a family's mood. A poor one could make the entire wagon feel colder. Food was not simply nourishment. It was routine, comfort, discipline, and hope measured in spoonfuls. The father cuts a strip of bacon into smaller pieces than seems morally fair. Each piece hisses in the skillet, shrinking as it cooks. The smell changes the atmosphere at once. Even the oxen seem interested, though that may be your imagination. Bacon was a common and valued trail food because it kept reasonably well when cured, provided fat and flavoured dull dishes. Fat was precious in cold conditions. It carried energy. It made beans more bearable. It transformed cornmeal from punishment into supper. The mother saves the grease. Of course she does. It is poured carefully into a small container, not wasted into the fire. Tomorrow it may season bread. Another night it may help fry dough. A little fat can make a meal feel larger than it is. Trail cooking rewards people who think ahead while exhausted, which is deeply unfair but historically consistent. The coffee goes around among the adults. Perhaps the older children receive a watered sip, perhaps not. The father holds his tin cup close and breathes in the steam before drinking. His face is tired in the firelight. Lines deepen around his eyes. He watches the river beyond the glow, still thinking of morning, still measuring the crossing in his mind. The mother watches the children eat. Her own bowl waits near her knee. She will eat soon, but first she confirms that the youngest is swallowing, that the boy has not burned his tongue into tragedy, that the older girl has enough. The fire pops. A tiny spark leaps and dies on the damp ground. Above, the sky is cleared in patches, revealing stars cold enough to look carved. Frost whitens the wagon tongue and the grass around the wheels. The canvas cover seems paler now, almost ghostly, but inside it bedding waits for warmed bodies. You take another bite. It is plain. It is good. Hunger and cold are excellent editors. They remove unnecessary criticism. A meal that might seem dull at a table back home becomes deeply satisfying beside a winter campfire. With river mist in the air and a long night ahead, the warmth does not stay in the mouth. It travels. Fingers loosen around the bowl. Shoulders ease. Conversation returns in small pieces. Someone mentions a neighbour's wagon train rumoured to be only a day ahead. Someone wonders if the crossing will be easier in morning. The boy asks whether bacon can freeze. The father says anything can freeze if it is foolish enough to stay out all night. This answer is not scientific, but it lands well enough. The last scrap is divided. The skillet is wiped. The bowls are cleaned with a little water and cloth, not enough to waste, enough to prevent trouble. Food must be stored securely. Crumbs invite pests. Smells can interest animals, even in cold. Carelessness has consequences. The mother wraps what remains. The father checks the coffee pot, then sets it aside where it will not be kicked in the dark. Now supper has done its work. It has warmed hands, bellies, and tempers. It has given the family a reason to sit close without speaking too much. It has turned the fire from a tool into a gathering place. If only for a little while. The night remains broad and cold beyond the circle of light, but inside each body a smaller fire has been lit. Soon they will return to the wagon. Soon quilts will be pulled high, boots placed carefully, children tucked into the warm centre. But for this moment, with the taste of cornmeal and bacon lingering softly, the family rests beside the coals and lets food carry them a little deeper into the night. The children are gathered back into the wagon before the cold can undo what supper has carefully repaired. One by one, they climb inside, warmer now but already losing heat to the night air. The youngest moves slowly, half asleep on her feet, cheeks flushed from firelight and food. The boy carries his bowl as though it might still contain something if he believes hard enough. It does not. This is a common disappointment in history. The older girl helps fold back the quilt, making a hollow in the bedding where the smaller children can settle quickly. The mother watches every movement with the focus of someone who knows that a child warm at bedtime may still wake chilled before midnight. You climb in behind them, feeling the wagon shift. The canvas flap falls and the world outside becomes muffled again. Firelight glows through the seams, faint and red. The inside smells warmer than before, though warm is perhaps too generous. It smells lived in. Wool, smoke, cornmeal, damp leather, sleepy breath, and the stubborn little trace of bacon grease that has made everyone feel slightly more optimistic about the universe. The mother begins with feet, not faces, not hands. Feet. She knows what she's doing. Wet socks can turn a cold night into misery, and children are wonderfully talented at hiding wet socks until the exact moment it becomes everyone's problem. She lifts the youngest child's skirt hem and touches the stockings. Dry enough? She checks the boy, who insists he is fine in the tone of a person about to be proven wrong. His socks are damp at the toes. He says they're only a little damp. The mother gives him a look. The law is clear. Off they come. On the emigrant trails, parents often had to guard children against exposure with limited clothing and bedding, especially when weather turned wet or freezing. Children walked, rode, fetched water, gathered fuel, minded younger siblings, and stumbled through mud like everyone else. Their smaller bodies lost heat more quickly, and their complaints could be both practical warnings and bedtime negotiations. A chilled child was not merely uncomfortable. A chilled child could become sick, and illness on the trail was a fear that sat quietly behind many ordinary chores. The mother rubs the boy's feet briskly with a cloth until he squirms. This is apparently both torture and salvation. She finds a drier pair of stockings from a bundle. Not perfectly dry, but better. Better is a very important word tonight. She warms them near the small lantern for a moment, then works them over his toes. He sighs with relief and immediately tries not to show it. The youngest child is placed between the older girl and the mother. She is wrapped, not just covered. There is a difference. The quilt comes around her shoulders, under her arms, across her legs, tucked along both sides. A shawl is folded over her feet. Her little cap is pulled down over her ears. She protests softly that she cannot hear. The mother says there is nothing worth hearing after dark. This is not true, of course. There is the river, the oxen, the wind, the spoon prophet from earlier, and possibly the boy's stomach preparing a second speech. But the child accepts the answer. A curious belief in some frontier households held that warming a child's nightcap near the fire helped prevent bad dreams as well as chills. The warmth certainly helped the child settle, but the dream part belongs to that tender borderland where care becomes folklore. A warmed cap says someone thought of you before sleep. Perhaps that alone could change the dreams, or at least make them arrive more politely. The older girl tucks one edge of the quilt beneath her own hip, making herself a barrier against drafts from the wagon side. She does this without being asked. You can see the quiet maturity of children who have been given responsibility early. She's still young enough to be cold, tired, and secretly wishing someone would tuck her in with the same care. Yet her hands move first toward the smaller child. The trail ages people unevenly. A girl may still whisper jokes with her brother and also know exactly how to keep a toddler from rolling into a cold gap beside the sideboard. The father passes in another coat from outside. It is stiff with cold, but it will warm under the quilt. The mother lays it over the children's legs. The boy complains that it is heavy. The father says heaviness is how you know it is still there. Again, not science, but useful enough for tired people. There is tenderness here, but it is not soft in the way modern comfort imagines softness. It is practical tenderness, a hand feeling for damp cloth, a cap pulled lower, a cup held to a child's mouth, a warning not to kick the blanket loose, a whispered hush before fear grows too large. Love is not always grand on the trail. Sometimes love is noticing one exposed finger and covering it before frost can make a lesson of it. Some researchers continue to question how children remembered the overland journey differently from adults. Adult diaries often recorded mileage, weather, food supplies, deaths, and decisions. Childhood memories, when preserved later, sometimes lingered on sensations: cold feet, warm biscuits, the smell of oxen, the terror of rivers, the thrill of sleeping under canvas, the ache of walking too far. It is possible that for many children, survival was experienced not as a great migration but as a chain of bodily moments: hunger, warmth, smoke, a mother's hand, a blanket pulled too tight. The youngest child's eyes are closing now. Her lashes rest on pink cheeks. Her breathing slows, then catches as she remembers one last urgent matter. She asks whether the river will come into the wagon. The mother answers, no. The wagon is above the bank. The father has set the brake. The animals are tied. Morning will come. Each fact is given calmly, one after another, like stones laid across a stream. The child follows them into reassurance. The boy is not asleep. Boys in cold wagons often specialize in not being asleep. He asks whether oxen sleep standing up. The father says sometimes they doze. The boy asks whether oxen get cold feet. The father says oxen have more sense than to remove their socks. This produces a small laugh under the quilt, quickly muffled. Even the mother smiles, though she's trying not to encourage conversation. Laughter, too, is warmth, but it is poor insulation if it keeps everyone awake. You lie beside the family and feel the shared heat building again. The children become the protected centre of the wagon's night architecture. Around them are adults, older siblings, quilts, coats, sacks, boards, canvas, darkness. Each layer is imperfect. Together they form a nest. Outside, the fire burns lower. The father will have to leave the bedding again soon to check the animals and bank the coals. The mother may wake before he returns, listening for footsteps, for coughing, for any change in the children's breathing. Freezing nights do not allow parents to sleep as deeply as they wish. A cough might mean smoke irritation. A restless child might mean cold. Silence might mean peace, or simply exhaustion. The smallest child shifts and presses her cold nose against her sister's sleeve. The older girl murmurs but does not move away. The boy finally settles, his newly dried feet tucked under the extra coat. The mother rests one hand over the quilt near the children's legs, feeling through fabric for movement and warmth. It is a watch as real as any guard duty outside. The wagon grows quieter. The river keeps moving beyond the canvas, and frost thickens on the boards beneath them. Yet inside, tucked in the warm centre, the children drift towards sleep. They're guarded by wool, by food, by habit, by tired jokes, by older hands that have learned the shape of danger without needing to name it too loudly. And for now, under the low curve of the wagon cover, that guarded warmth is enough to carry them deeper into the freezing night. The animals stand just beyond the wagon's faint glow, large dark shapes breathing clouds into the cold. At first, they seem separate from the family's warmth, part of the outside world where frost gathers and the river speaks over stones. Yet the longer you listen, the more clearly you understand that the oxen, horses, and mules are not merely background figures in this freezing camp. They are the reason the wagon moves. They are the family's strength stored in muscle and patience. They are also another set of living bodies that must survive the night. The father lifts the rear canvas flap and slips out into the cold. The movement lets a blade of air cut through the bedding, and everyone inside tightens instinctively. The flap falls closed behind him, muffling the world again, but you follow in thought as his boots touch the frozen ground. Outside, the stars look sharper now. The fire is lower, red and watchful, with only small flames licking along a partly burned branch. The animals shift near their picket line, hooves pressing into stiff mud. Oxen were widely used by emigrant families because they were strong, patient, and often more affordable than horses or mules. They could pull heavy wagons, survive on rough forage, and endure difficult roads with a steady pace. They were not fast. No, an ox team did not exactly suggest glamorous speed. If a horse is a spirited violin solo, an ox is a church bell being dragged uphill. But on the overland trails, steady mattered more than stylish. The father moves among them quietly. He checks the yoke, the lines, the knots, the ground beneath their feet. A tired animal tangled in rope can injure itself. An animal left too loose may wander. A hungry one may pull toward brush. A frightened one can unsettle the whole camp. In freezing weather, care becomes more important, because stiffness, hunger, and poor rest weaken animals just as surely as people. You smell them now. Warm hide, damp hair, manure, leather. Hay that is not quite enough. The odour is heavy but not unpleasant in the way city noses might imagine. It is animal life, close and necessary. Their bodies give off heat, and standing near them is warmer than standing alone in the open. You can feel it when the father passes beside the lead ox. A slow warmth radiates from the great flank, mixed with the steam of breath and the sweet sour smell of cud. Some travellers noticed that livestock could create a small pocket of warmth near a camp, especially when animals were gathered close and shielded from wind. No one would confuse this with a heated room, unless that person had a very tragic room, but it mattered. Families sometimes placed wagons and animals in ways that offered mutual protection. A wagon could block wind for animals. Animals could alert people to movement in the dark. Their sounds became part of the camp's warning system. Inside the wagon, the children know the animals by name. That matters too. The oxen are not machines. They have tempers, habits, preferences, and a gift for stopping at the worst possible moment. One may be gentle with children. Another may swing its head if annoyed. A mule may remember an insult from 3 states ago and be waiting for the right legal opportunity. The family depends on them, and dependence makes attention intimate. A curious bit of frontier law claimed that animals could sense storms before people could, especially if they turned away from the wind, refused feed, or grew restless under a clear sky. There is some practical observation inside such belief, because animals do respond to pressure changes, smells, and discomfort in ways humans may notice only later. But families could also read too much into every snort and hoof scrape. On a freezing night beside a river, even an ox chewing quietly can seem like a weather oracle with horns. The father runs a hand along one animal's shoulder. He checks for rubbing from the yoke. The skin there can become sore after long pulling. If a sore worsens, tomorrow's travel suffers. If tomorrow's travel suffers, the whole family loses time. And time on the trail is not abstract. It is grass before it dries out, rivers before they rise, passes before snow, markets before supplies run thin. A small wound beneath a yoke can ripple outward into hunger, delay, and danger. He breaks ice forming near the water container. The sound is faint but crisp. The animals need water, yet river banks at night are treacherous, and no sensible person wants to lead tired livestock too close to dark water unless necessary. He offers what he can. The ox lowers its head and drinks with slow, heavy movements. Another exhales through its nose, scattering vapour into the starlight. People who study overland migration have discussed how often animal care shaped family survival more than dramatic human choices did. The old stories often centre on brave crossings, fierce storms, or bold decisions, but the daily condition of draft animals may have mattered just as much. A family could be strong, determined, and morally prepared for hardship, yet if the team failed, the wagon stopped, supplies could not move themselves. Hope, unfortunately, has poor traction without animals. The father knows this. Though he may not phrase it that way, he checks each knot again. He examines the ground for places where an animal might slip if it startles. He gathers a little feed and divides it with care. The amounts are never as generous as anyone would like. Animals working hard in cold weather need energy, but feed takes space, and grazing depends on land, season, and weather. On some stretches, families counted on finding grass. On others, they carried grain. Every pound of feed in the wagon had to justify itself against flour, tools, blankets, and everything else. Inside the wagon, the boy stirs and asks whether Pa is with the oxen. The mother says yes. The boy asks whether wolves will come. The mother answers that wolves usually have better manners than hungry boys at supper. This is not a full zoological explanation, but it works well enough. The boy settles, perhaps imagining wolves gathered politely beyond the fire, discussing etiquette, outside. The father hears a distant sound, not close, perhaps another camp, perhaps a branch cracking in frost, perhaps only the river changing tone around a stone. The oxen hear it too, lifting their heads. Their ears turn. For a moment, everyone is listening. Animals and man together, joined by attention. Then one ox resumes chewing, and the tension fades. If the ox is not impressed, the father decides he will not be either. This is not a foolproof system, but it has a certain rustic efficiency. He returns to the fire and stirs the coals. A few sparks rise. He places another small stick where it can catch slowly, more for embers than flame. Then he looks toward the wagon, where the canvas glows faintly from the banked lantern within. His family sleeps or tries to. Their warmth depends on quilts, food, clothing, and closeness. Tomorrow, their movement depends on the animal standing behind him in the cold. You feel the link between them all now. The people keep the animals alive, and the animals carry the people onward. The wagon is not just wood and canvas. It is part of a larger living arrangement. A fragile winter machine made of hooves, hands, harness, breath, and trust. If one part fails, all feel it. The father pauses near the lead ox before climbing back inside. He pats the animal once, gently, almost absently. The ox blinks, slow and dark-eyed, breath steaming in the night. No speech passes between them. None is needed. The trail has made its own language of pulling, feeding, waiting, and going on. Then the father lifts the flap and returns to the crowded wagon, bringing with him the smell of frost, leather, smoke, and animal warmth. The first sign of the storm is not snow. It is the change in sound. The river, which has been murmuring all evening with steady patience, seems to flatten under the dark. The oxen grow quieter. The canvas above you tightens with a faint, dry ticking, as if invisible fingers are tapping along the weave. Then a low breath of wind moves across the camp. Not strong yet, just cold enough to make everyone inside the wagon listen without admitting they are listening. The mother opens her eyes. You feel it happen before she moves. A shift in the bedding, a pause in her breathing. The small alertness of a person whose sleep is never entirely separate from responsibility. The children remain bundled in the warm centre, still breathing slowly. The father has only just settled again near the rear flap after checking the animals, and now he lifts his head, waiting. Another gust comes, stronger. The canvas gives a soft thump. A loose tie taps against wood, somewhere outside. A coal collapses in the fire with a faint hiss. The air slipping under the wagon cover smells different now. Sharper. Wetter. The kind of smell that says the sky has made a decision and will not be asking for family input. Storms on the overland trails could change camp routine very quickly. A family might settle for an ordinary cold night, then face sleet, snow, freezing rain, or high wind before morning. Covered wagons offered some protection, but canvas could leak, tear, sag under wet snow, or flap violently if not secured. Keeping bedding dry became urgent. So did protecting food, fire, animals, and any tools needed at first light. A storm was not one problem. It was many small problems arriving together, like guests with no manners. The father pushes the quilt aside carefully, trying not to wake the children. This fails almost immediately. The boy opens one eye. Is it morning? No. This answer contains a world of disappointment. The father reaches for his coat, already cold from where it lies near the edge. He pulls it on with slow, stiff movements. The mother sits up and tucks the quilt tighter around the children before his movement can spill too much warmth. The oldest girl wakes as well, blinking in the dimness. She doesn't ask what is happening. She listens to the canvas, and her face understands. A scatter of hard pellets strikes the wagon cover. Not snow yet. Sleet. Tiny icy grains ticking overhead. Then more. Then many. The sound fills the enclosed space, soft and constant, like dry seeds poured over cloth. The youngest child wakes and turns her face into the older girl's shoulder. The boy sits up too far, letting cold air under the quilt, and is gently but firmly pressed back down. Family life, even during a storm, still contains consequences for poor blanket management. The father lifts the rear flap just enough to look out. Wind shoves at the opening, and cold rain needles in. The lantern flame bends. You glimpse the camp beyond him, fire dimmed, oxen dark and restless, riverbank fading behind a curtain of sleet. The world has narrowed to motion and sound. He drops the flap again. The first emergency measure is the canvas. If it loosens, the family loses shelter. The father must go out. The mother does not like this, but she also does not waste time pretending there is another choice. She hands him the lantern, then changes her mind and takes it back. Better to keep light inside. He knows the knots by feel. A peculiar trail belief said that if sleet began before midnight, the weather would last until dawn. But if snow came first, it might pass quickly. Like many weather sayings, it contains more confidence than reliability. Still, people watch such signs closely. On the trail, a little folk forecasting could shape whether a family rose early, slept badly, packed before sunrise, or waited out the sky. And when you have no barometer, no radio, and no cheerful weather app lying to you in bright colours, a proverb begins to look surprisingly official. The father slips outside, the flap closes. For a moment, the wagon feels smaller without him. The mother turns immediately to work. She pulls the bedding away from the canvas wall where damp may seep in. She checks the flour sack. She moves the coffee pot farther from the opening. She folds a spare shawl and wedges it into a draft gap. The older girl helps, keeping one hand on the youngest child so she does not roll into the cold edge. The sleet grows louder. The canvas roof, which seemed gentle earlier, now becomes a drum. Every gust presses it inward. The wagon sways faintly on its wheels. The children listen. You listen with them. Outside, the father's boots crunch on frozen ground. A rope snaps against wood, then goes quiet as he secures it. He moves along the side, tightening ties, pulling the cover down, checking where the canvas meets the wagon bed. His hands must be aching by now. Wet rope in freezing weather is a miserable little invention of the universe. The mother reaches for a small bundle and removes an extra piece of cloth. She places it over the youngest child's cap and around her ears. The child asks if the wagon will blow away. The mother answers that it has carried them this far and is far too tired to fly tonight. The older girl smiles in the dark. The boy asks if wagons can fly if the wind is strong enough. No one encourages this line of inquiry. Some historians still dispute how often emigrant families took shelter inside wagons during severe storms rather than under them, beside them, or in makeshift tents depending on season and terrain. The answer seems to vary widely. A wagon might be too full to sleep in comfortably, yet better than open ground. In some conditions, people slept beneath wagons for wind protection. In others, wet ground made that impossible. The image of every family tucked neatly under canvas hides the improvisation that real weather demanded. The father returns with sleet on his shoulders and hat brim. His face is wet and red from cold. He brings in the smell of storm, raw and metallic, mixed with smoke from the struggling coals. The mother reaches for his sleeve and brushes ice away before it can melt into the bedding. He reports that the animals are tied, the cover is tighter, and the fire is nearly gone. No one suggests rebuilding it now. Wind and sleet would steal more heat than the flame could repay, and sparks near flapping canvas would be dangerous. The storm has changed the plan. Fire before full darkness mattered. Yes, but now dry bedding matters more. The family must conserve the warmth already made. The father settles again, but not fully. He stays near the opening, listening for animal trouble. The oxen shift outside, their chains sounding dull in the sleet. One snorts, another stamps. The mother listens too, but her attention remains split between animals, canvas, children, and the damp spot forming near one side seam. She presses a folded cloth there, then another. It is not elegant. It works for now. The wagon becomes a small boat in weather, not floating on water, but held in a moving dark of wind and ice. The canvas trembles, the wheels creak, the river rises in sound whenever the gusts fall, as if reminding everyone that it is still there, still cold, still waiting for morning. You lie under the quilt as the family tightens around the children. The storm makes closeness necessary again. No one has extra room now. No one wants it. The older girl curls around the youngest. The boy pulls his feet under the coat without being told. The mother's hand rests on the damp cloth near the seam, testing it from time to time. The father sits with his back against the sideboard, eyes open. The sleet softens after a while into snow. The sound changes from ticking to whispering. The canvas no longer drums, it receives. The wagon seems to exhale, yet the danger is not gone. Wet snow can gather weight if too much collects on the cover. Someone must knock it loose. If it melts and refreezes, the morning will be cruel. Still, for this hour, the family holds. Their ordinary routine is bent but not broken. Supper is done, bedding is guarded, children are warm, animals are watched, canvas is tied. The storm walks around them in the dark, pressing, testing, searching for weakness. And inside the wagon, under cloth and breath and stubborn care, they answer by staying close. The snow keeps falling in a softer voice now, but the work inside the wagon does not end. That is the thing about cold nights. They may look still from outside, with canvas bowed under pale powder and animals standing like dark statues near the wheels. Yet within that stillness a woman's hands keep moving. The mother has not slept properly since the storm began. Perhaps she has not slept properly since the journey began. She sits with her shoulder near the damp seam, one hand resting on folded cloth, feeling whether moisture is spreading through the layers. Her other hand lies across the quilt that covers the children, measuring warmth through fabric the way someone else might read a clock. You can hear the father breathing near the rear flap, not fully asleep, but withdrawn into the heavy silence of exhaustion. He has checked the ropes, the animals, the canvas, the fire, and the darkness outside. His work is visible. It makes sounds. Boots on frozen ground, rope pulled tight, wood shifted, animals calmed. The mother's work is quieter. It disappears almost as soon as it is done, which is unfair, though history has often been very talented at unfairness. She adjusts the youngest child's cap. The child has loosened it in sleep, one ear exposed to the cold. The mother draws the wool back down and tucks a curl beneath it. Then she slides her fingers along the child's neck to see if the skin is warm, not feverish, not chilled. She checks the boy's feet by touch, still covered, still dry enough. She smooths the quilt where his knees have made a ridge that could let air tunnel underneath. She leans across you, presses the edge down, and waits until the trapped warmth steadies. Women on the overland trails carried enormous domestic labour, much of it essential to survival. They cooked, washed, mended, nursed, packed and unpacked goods, cared for children, managed food stores, preserved clothing, and often walked long distances alongside the wagon. Many also helped with animals, fires, and camp setup when needed. Their work made the daily migration possible, yet it was often described as ordinary household duty, as if ordinary things do not become heroic when performed in sleet beside a river. The older girl stirs. She's awake too, though trying not to be. Her eyes open in the dim lantern glow. The mother sees this and lifts one finger to her lips. No need to wake the others. The girl nods and carefully pulls the youngest closer, sharing more of her own warmth. In that gesture, you see apprenticeship. Not formal, no lessons spoken, just a child watching a mother's hands for years, learning where the drafts come from, how to fold a shawl, how to quiet fear before it has a chance to spread. The mother reaches for a damp sock that had been left near the wagon side. It is colder now, unpleasant to touch. She tucks it into a place where it may dry slowly from body warmth without touching skin. This is not glamorous. Nobody writes ballads about strategic sock placement. More's the pity, really. But a dry sock at dawn may spare a child pain, and pain saved is a kind of victory. A small superstition once carried in some frontier families claimed that turning wet socks inside out overnight helped draw sickness away from the body. The practical part was that turning them exposed more damp fabric to air and heat. The magical part was the hope that illness could be tricked into leaving through the toes. You may smile at that, gently. But after days of cold feet, smoke, poor sleep, and coughing children, hope tends to dress itself in whatever explanation is available. The mother listens to the boy's breathing. He has a slight rasp, perhaps smoke, perhaps cold air, perhaps nothing. She waits through several breaths. The sound eases. Her shoulders lower a little. Then the youngest coughs once, a small dry cough that cuts through the wagon like a spark. Everyone pauses. The child settles again. The mother reaches for a cup, adds a little water from a covered container, and warms it between her hands before touching it to the child's lips. The child drinks without fully waking. Some scholars have questioned whether women's trail diaries present hardship differently from men's accounts, because their attention often rested on bodies, meals, clothing, illness, and emotional strain rather than mileage alone. That difference is not small. It changes the map. A route can be measured in rivers crossed and miles made, but it can also be measured in damp hems, lost buttons, crying children, spoiled flour, aching feet, and the number of times a woman woke in the dark to check whether everyone was still warm. The mother shifts the small food bundle with her foot, keeping it away from the damp seam. Flour must stay dry. Cornmeal must stay dry. Salt must stay dry. Sugar, if there is any left, must be guarded like treasure with a sweet personality. Damp supplies can clump, sour, mould, or become difficult to cook. A freezing night is never only about people. It threatens food, cloth, rope, leather, paper, memory. You notice the mother's hands in the low light. They are roughened at the knuckles, red from cold, cracked in places. They move carefully even when tired. She has probably washed clothing in cold water, lifted iron pots, kneaded dough in awkward places, wrung wet cloth, tied bundles, held reins, carried children, and mended tears with thread so small it must have seemed personally insulting. Tonight those hands are the wall between the family and the storm. The older girl whispers that she can sit up a while. The mother shakes her head. Sleep, she mouths. The girl hesitates, then obeys, though her eyes remain open. Duty pulls at her already. The mother knows that. She also knows a tired girl tomorrow will stumble, snap, or fall behind. Rest must be protected too, even when the person protecting it has none. Outside, snow slides softly from one part of the canvas and falls beside the wagon with a faint thud. The father wakes fully at once. The mother touches his sleeve before he rises, listening. The canvas holds. No immediate danger. He settles back, but she remains alert a little longer. She counts heartbeats, gusts, animal sounds, child breaths, all without numbers. It is a night watch made of care rather than weapons. The lantern has burned low. She adjusts the wick down further to save oil. Darkness thickens, but not entirely. Firelight from the coals outside gives the canvas a dull reddish breath whenever the wind shifts. The mother uses that faint light to find a needle tucked into a small cloth roll. A tear near the edge of a child's mitten has widened. She should leave it until morning. She does not. Her fingers move slowly, drawing thread through wool, making the repair while the child sleeps. A mitten closed now means one less opening for frost at dawn. This invisible labour is not separate from survival. It is survival in its most persistent form. It is the work that prevents emergencies rather than responding to them after they bloom. It is the tucked quilt, the guarded flower, the mended mitten, the warmed sip of water, the quiet joke saved for morning, the fear swallowed so children can sleep. You lie there as the storm softens around the wagon, and you understand that warmth is not only produced by fire, food, cloth, and bodies. It is also produced by attention. Someone must notice. Someone must keep noticing. The mother does, through the long, cold hours, while the river waits, the oxen breathe, the snow gathers, and the family sleeps inside the fragile shelter her hands keep making, again and again. The father waits until the wagon has gone quiet again before he rises. He does it slowly, as though each movement must ask permission from the cold. First the blanket shifts, then one boot finds the floorboard, then the other. The boards answer with a small creak that seems far too loud inside the sleeping wagon. The mother opens her eyes at once, because by now her body appears to have developed a private alarm system. He gestures gently that all is well, or at least well enough. She does not fully believe him, but she lets him go. The rear flap lifts, and the night slips in. Cold pours across the bedding like water. The father bends his shoulders and steps outside, pulling the flap closed behind him. For a moment, you feel the whole wagon hold its breath. The children remain bundled at the warm centre. The older girl has finally fallen asleep, her hand still resting protectively near the youngest child's cap. The mother lies still, listening for the father's first steps beyond the canvas. Outside, the storm has eased, but the world is not peaceful. It is only quieter. Snow lies thin over the ground. not deep enough to soften everything, just enough to hide stones, ruts, frozen mud, and every other small trap designed to humble tired men in the dark. The coals under the ashes glow faintly. The river moves with a thicker sound now, its edges laced with ice. The animals stand as shadow shapes under the stars, their breath rising in slow clouds. Night watch was a practical necessity in many camps, especially where animals, weather, theft, fire, or hostile conditions might threaten the group. Wagon trains sometimes organised watches, with men and older boys taking turns guarding livestock and keeping an eye on camp. The exact routine varied by company, terrain, season, and perceived danger. In some places, animal loss could be more frightening than almost anything else, because a stolen or wandering team could strand a family as surely as a broken axle. The father pulls his coat tighter and tucks his hands beneath his arms for a moment. His fingers are stiff. The cold has found every crack in his gloves. He flexes them, slowly, painfully. Frozen hands are more than uncomfortable. They make knots difficult, harness buckles cruel, and tools nearly useless. A man may be strong and determined, but if his fingers cannot close around a rope, determination becomes more philosophical than helpful. He moves toward the oxen. Each step crunches softly. Snow over frost, frost over mud. The animals lift their heads as he approaches, then settle when they know his shape. He speaks to them in a low voice, not because they understand every word, but because a familiar sound carries calm. One ox snorts, another stamps once, shaking snow from a hoof. The father checks the rope lines and the place where the animals are tied. He bends close to a knot, working it with fingers that do not want to cooperate. You can almost feel the ache of it, the clumsy stiffness, the quiet irritation at a knot that has chosen tonight to develop a personality. Some camp stories claimed that a man on watch should keep a small pebble in his mouth to stay awake, or hold it under his tongue so drowsiness would not overtake him. It sounds uncomfortable, which may be the point. Others used chewing tobacco, singing under the breath, pacing, prayer, or simply fear. On a freezing night, sleep can creep in with dangerous sweetness. A person who sits too long beside low coals may drift before meaning to. The cold does not always arrive with drama. Sometimes it arrives as comfort. The father walks the edge of camp. The wagon's pale cover rises behind him. Snow clings to the upper canvas, and he studies the weight of it. Not too much yet. He taps one side with a pole, gently. Powder slides down in a soft sheet, whispering against the sideboard before falling to the ground. Inside, someone stirs but does not wake fully. He waits, then taps again. More snow slides away. The cover lifts slightly, relieved of its burden. At the next wagon, farther down the bank, another man stands near a dim lantern. The two figures see each other and raise hands without speaking. That small gesture is enough. You are awake. I am awake. The camp still holds. There is companionship in that, even without conversation. Men on watch often occupied a strange border between isolation and community, alone with the dark but tied to every sleeping person they guarded. The father returns toward the fire pit. He kneels and stirs the ash carefully with a stick. A red eye opens beneath grey powder. The coals are alive. Good. He adds a small piece of fuel, not enough for a blaze, just enough to keep embers through the coldest hours. A full fire would need feeding. A full fire might throw sparks. Embers are quieter, and quiet is useful now. Modern scholars continue to weigh how much fear of theft or attack shaped nightly watches, compared with the more ordinary need to protect animals from wandering, weather, or predators. Popular memory often favours dramatic danger, because it makes better stories. Yet many watches were probably spent doing exactly what you see now: walking, listening, checking knots, watching clouds, tending embers, and trying not to fall asleep while nothing obvious happens. History is full of nothing obvious, and most survival depends on it. He hears a sound across the river, a crack, perhaps ice breaking near the edge. The oxen hear it too. One raises its head. The father stands still, eyes toward the dark water. The sound does not repeat. He waits longer than feels necessary, because unnecessary waiting is often how one proves a sound is harmless. Then he exhales slowly and resumes his circuit. His hands ache again. He rubs them together, then holds them over the coals. The heat is weak but welcome. His palms sting as warmth returns. He turns them once, then again. Smoke rises around him and settles into his coat. He has smelled of smoke for so many days now that perhaps he would seem strange without it. Back home, smoke may have meant hearth and supper. Here it means survival, irritation, laundry that will never recover, and coffee that tastes faintly like a burned fence post. The older boy appears at the wagon flap, wrapped in a blanket, hair wild, eyes barely open. Pennsylvania. The father turns quickly and gestures him back inside. The boy whispers that he can help. The father studies him for a moment. There is pride in the offer, and also the simple fact that the boy is cold, tired, and not yet as useful as he believes. Still, boys become men partly by standing in places where they are not entirely needed yet. The father steps closer and speaks quietly. He tells him to check the younger children from inside. Keep the blanket tucked. Tell Ma if the damp seam worsens. That is watch 2. The boy nods, honoured and disappointed in equal measure, which is a difficult combination but common in youth. He disappears back into the wagon. The father continues his round. The night opens above him, black and bright with stars between drifting clouds. The snow has stopped for now. The river breathes cold into the camp. Animals stand. Canvas stiffens. Wheels remain frozen in place. Behind every quiet shape lies the possibility of trouble, but also the comfort of routine. Check the ropes, check the coals, check the canvas, listen, walk, warm the hands, repeat. There is no applause for this. No one inside the wagon will fully know how many times he rose, how often he paused at a sound, how carefully he watched the animal's feet, how sharply the cold bit through his gloves. By morning, it will simply appear that the animals remained. The canvas held, the fire had embers, and the family could begin again. Much labour looks like nothing when it succeeds. At last. He returns to the wagon and lifts the flap. The mother's eyes open before he speaks. He tells her the storm has eased. The animals are quiet. The coals are banked. The river is no worse. She nods, and in the dimness, that is almost a prayer. He settles back at the edge of the bedding, hands still cold, coat damp with snow, face tired beyond words. The boy, awake inside his blanket, has kept the quilt tucked around the younger children with solemn devotion. The father sees this and rests one hand briefly on his shoulder. Outside, the watch continues without him for a little while, carried by embers, animals, frost, and the soft intelligence of a camp that has survived another hour. The cough returns just before the deepest part of night. It is small at first, hardly more than a rough breath from the youngest child tucked in the warm centre of the wagon. Then it comes again, sharper this time, and the mother is awake before anyone can pretend it was nothing. Her hand moves across the quilt, finding the child's shoulder, then her cheek, then the little hollow under the jaw where warmth and worry meet. You lie still, listening. The wagon is dark except for the dullest glow from the lantern wick and the faint red breath of coals beyond the canvas. Snow has stopped falling, but the air remains raw. The river sounds thicker now, pushing softly under thin edges of ice. The oxen shift outside, their chains making a tired clink. Inside, the child coughs again and curls toward her mother. Illness was one of the great fears of overland migration. Families carried simple medicine chests when they could, often stocked with items such as quinine, calomel, laudanum, camphor, castor oil, peppermint, mustard, salves, and bandages. Some remedies helped, some did little. Some could be harmful by modern standards. But on a cold night far from a doctor, with a child coughing under damp canvas, even a bitter spoonful could feel like action, and action could keep fear from filling the wagon. The mother lifts the child carefully, keeping the quilt wrapped around her shoulders. The child does not fully wake. Her eyes open halfway, dark and confused, then close again as another cough shakes her small body. The mother listens closely. Is it smoke in the throat from the evening fire, cold air, damp bedding? The start of something worse. The questions arrive quietly but quickly, and none of them are welcome. She reaches toward a small wooden box tucked near the side. It is not large, and nothing about it looks dramatic. But inside are scraps of household medicine, the travelling version of every family's hope that trouble will remain manageable. A cloth packet, a small bottle, a twist of herbs, a spoon wrapped in linen. The father wakes and props himself on one elbow. He says nothing at first. Saying the wrong thing in the dark can make worry larger. The mother pours a little water into a cup. It is cold. She holds it between both hands, warming it as much as she can, then asks the father to pass the covered tin that still holds a trace of warmth near the coals. He lifts the flap briefly and brings it in, along with a hard slice of cold air that makes the child whimper. The mother mixes a simple drink, perhaps warm water with a little sugar if any can be spared, perhaps a bit of peppermint or another familiar household flavour. Not a cure, exactly, a comfort. Sometimes comfort is the first medicine available. A peculiar piece of 19th century household law claimed that onions placed near a sickbed could draw illness out of the air. Some families swore by sliced onion, vinegar cloths, camphor smells, or mustard plasters for congestion and chills. The onion did not pull sickness from the room like a tiny vegetable physician, charming as that image may be, but strong smells, warm cloths, and attentive care gave people something to do when sickness felt invisible. And when you're trapped in a wagon at night, doing something can feel like holding a candle against the dark. The child sips. Her face twists at the taste. The mother murmurs praise as if she's performed a great civic duty, which perhaps she has. The older girl wakes and watches silently. She reaches for the child's cap, straightens it, and tucks the edge lower. The boy opens his eyes and immediately looks frightened. He is old enough to understand that sickness on the trail can change everything, yet young enough to want someone to tell him it will not. The father speaks softly then. Just smoke, maybe. Cold in the throat. She will sleep. The words are plain, not certain, but shaped to be useful. He has no wish to lie, yet he knows truth can be portioned gently in the dark. People who study trail diaries still debate how emigrant families distinguished ordinary discomfort from serious illness before symptoms became undeniable. A cough could be dust, smoke, chill, measles, whooping cough, pneumonia, or simply exhaustion made audible. A stomach pain could be bad water, spoiled food, fear, or the beginning of something deadly. Without modern diagnosis, families relied on observation, experience, prayer, rumour, and the frightening little calendar of whether a person seemed better or worse by morning. The mother settles the child upright against her for a while, because lying flat worsens the cough. This means she herself cannot lie down properly. Her back presses against the cold side of the wagon. A folded shawl cushions her shoulder from the boards, but not much. She holds the child close beneath the quilt, one hand rubbing small circles between the shoulder blades. The child's breathing slowly eases, not perfect, easier. You notice how the entire wagon has changed around this one cough. Before, it was a crowded sleeping place. Now it is a sick room. However humble, bedding becomes nursing equipment, a cup becomes medicine, a shawl becomes a warmer, the mother's lap becomes a chair, the father becomes watchman and assistant, the older girl becomes quiet helper, the boy becomes very still, which may be his most useful contribution tonight. The smell of the small remedy lingers, faintly sweet, faintly sharp. It mingles with smoke and wool. The mother touches the child's forehead, warm, but not burning. She waits, checks again, waits. The child dozes upright, mouth slightly open, lashes resting against flushed cheeks. Outside, a clump of snow slides from the canvas and lands softly near the wheel. The father opens the medicine box again, examining the little bottle by touch more than sight. Laudanum was commonly present in many 19th century medicine kits, used for pain, diarrhea, coughs, and sleep, though it contained opium and carried real dangers, especially for children. Some families used it cautiously, others used it too freely because the risks were not understood in the way they are now. The mother shakes her head before he even offers it. Not unless worse. Not tonight, if the child can settle without it. That decision, too, is medicine. She chooses warmth, positioning, sips, watching. She chooses patience. The child coughs once more, but it is softer. The boy exhales. The older girl lowers her head again, though she keeps her eyes open. The father closes the medicine box and places it where it can be found quickly if needed. In the dark, knowing where things are is nearly as important as having them. Prayer comes quietly. Not a speech, not a sermon, just the mother's lips moving near the child's hair, or perhaps the father's hand resting for a moment on the quilt, on the trail. Faith often lived beside practical care, not instead of it. People prayed and boiled water. They trusted God and checked symptoms. They asked mercy and mended mittens. The sacred and the ordinary shared the same cramped wagon. Gradually, the child's breathing lengthens. The cough does not vanish, but it retreats. The mother continues holding her upright long after everyone else might have decided the danger had passed, because mothers do not trust danger simply because it has grown quiet. The father settles back near the flap, but his eyes remain open. The older girl finally sleeps. The boy follows, one hand tucked under his cheek. The wagon becomes still again, yet it is a different stillness now, more fragile, more watchful. You understand that surviving a freezing night inside a covered wagon was never only about blankets and fire. It was also about illness that could begin with one small cough, about remedies carried in tiny bottles, about choices made without certainty, about the human hand resting through the dark on a child's back, counting every breath until morning. The child sleeps again, and the quiet that follows feels borrowed from the storm. No one trusts it completely. The mother keeps her hand near the youngest child's back, feeling the rhythm of breath through quilt and wool. The father listens from the outer edge of the bedding, half turned toward the flap, as though the night itself might speak if it needs something. The boy sleeps with his mouth open, entirely recovered from his brief promotion to assistant watchman. The older girl rests curled protectively around the small warm shape beside her. Outside, snow lies thin on the ground, and beyond the wagon a second fire glows through the dark. It belongs to another family. You had nearly forgotten them in the closeness of this wagon. but they have been there all along, just farther down the bank, making their own arrangements against the cold. Their wagon stands under a dark cottonwood, its canvas sagging slightly where snow has collected. A lantern moves inside. A man's voice comes softly through the night, followed by the faint scrape of metal on iron. Someone is tending a kettle, or perhaps shifting a skillet from the coals. The smell of smoke from their camp drifts over the snow and mingles with your own. Wagon trains often formed practical travelling communities, even when families were not close friends. Companies shared information about water, grass, river crossings, weather, repairs, and danger. They also lent tools, helped with sick travellers, assisted at difficult crossings, and sometimes pooled labour when animals strayed or wagons broke. The trail could make neighbours out of strangers very quickly, because privacy was lovely in theory, but a spare axle pin or a dry blanket was better. The father hears movement near the other fire and lifts the flap carefully. Cold touches every face inside the wagon. He pauses, then steps out. This time he does not go toward the animals first. He walks toward the neighbouring camp, boots crunching over the thin snow, shoulders hunched against the cold. The other man sees him coming and raises a hand. The gesture is slow, tired, without surprise. At this hour, everyone awake is awake for a reason. The father speaks quietly. The younger child has coughed. The canvas seam grew damp. The storm eased. How are yours? The other man answers that their baby cried for an hour. Their coffee froze at the rim of the pot, and their eldest dropped a mitten somewhere between the fire and the wagon, which is a tragic journey of perhaps 12 feet. History contains grand distances, yes, but also the mysterious disappearance of one mitten in plain sight. The two men stand near the coals, their breath pale in the dark. A woman from the neighbouring wagon appears with a shawl over her head. She has heard enough to understand. She asks about the child's cough. The father tells her it is quieter now. She nods and disappears into her wagon. A moment later she returns with a small folded cloth and a pinch of dried herb wrapped inside. She says it is for steeping if the cough worsens. She does not present it like a miracle, more like a habit brought from home, carried across too many miles to be abandoned now. A charming fragment from trail memory tells of families trading not only supplies but also songs, recipes, weather sayings, and remedies, as if culture itself travelled in little parcels from wagon to wagon. One woman might bring a way to make rough corn cakes softer. Another might know how to patch canvas with flour paste in an emergency. Someone else might insist that a certain tea calmed coughing, or that a story told in a low voice could settle frightened children. Whether all of it worked is beside the point. Shared knowledge warmed the camp almost as much as shared fire. The father accepts the cloth with thanks, no speeches. The cold does not encourage ceremony. He offers in return a little bacon grease for the neighbour's morning pan, because generosity on the trail often takes the form of something wrapped in cloth and slightly smoky. The woman smiles. Bacon grease has a way of improving diplomacy. Back inside your wagon, the mother takes the herb packet and smells it. Her expression softens, not because she believes it will solve everything, but because another woman has reached across the dark with help. That is no small thing. The trail is full of leaving houses, kin, fields, graves, known roads, familiar churches, neighbours who once knew your name without asking. In such a world, a small act of care can feel like a piece of home briefly restored. Scholars continue to examine whether wagon train cooperation was driven more by genuine community feeling or by practical necessity. The answer, like most human answers, is probably both. People helped because they were kind. People helped because tomorrow they might need help themselves. People helped because watching another family suffer nearby was difficult. People helped because survival favoured cooperation. even among quarrelsome souls who would later argue over grazing rights, camp rules, or whose dog had stolen whose biscuit. The neighbouring fire grows slightly brighter as another stick catches. Around it, figures move slowly. Someone shakes snow from a blanket. Someone lifts a pot. A child begins to cry, then is hushed with the soft rhythm that belongs to parents in every century. The sound carries through the cold, thin and human, and the mother in your wagon listens with sympathy. Her own child sleeps now. Another does not. The night passes its worry from canvas to canvas. The father mentions that the canvas is holding except for one seam. The neighbour suggests rubbing the seam with tallow if any can be spared, or pressing another cloth from inside until morning. Another traveller, roused by voices, adds from the darkness that a strip of old flour sack works better if folded twice. Advice travels quickly in camp, especially when nobody asked for quite that much of it. Yet some of it is useful, and even the useless advice has the comforting shape of company. Soon the men walk together to check the animals. 2 sets of eyes are better than one. They find the oxen quiet, though snow has crusted along their backs. They brush some away by hand. The neighbour's mule gives the father a narrow look, as if remembering every injustice ever committed by mankind. The father wisely does not argue with it. When they return, the other family shares a few embers from their stronger fire, carried carefully in a small pan with ash. Your family's coals had been fading, but these revive them. It is a simple transfer. Red points glowing under grey powder, yet it feels almost ceremonial. Fire given from one camp to another. Warmth divided, and therefore enlarged. The mother uses the revived coals to warm a little water, not much, enough to keep ready. The herb packet rests near her knee. The older girl wakes enough to ask where it came from. The mother says, "From Mrs. Bell, down the bank." The girl nods as if this explains more than geography. It means someone else is awake. Someone else knows. Someone else is listening to the same cold night. The wagon settles again. Outside, the neighbouring voices fade. The camps remain separate, each wrapped in its own canvas, its own worries, its own sleeping children and guarded supplies. But between them lies a quiet thread of shared warmth, a cloth packet, a bit of grease, advice about seams, embers carried across snow, a raised hand in the dark. You feel how survival here is never purely private. A family may sleep inside its own wagon, but it lives within a moving village of need. One night, you lend a pan. Another, you borrow a rope. One morning, you help push a wheel from mud. Another evening, someone offers a song when fear has grown too thick. The trail stretches wide and lonely, yet along it people make little circles of obligation, fragile as firelight, necessary as bread. Inside the wagon, the youngest child breathes softly. The mother finally lowers her head against the folded shawl behind her. The father rests again near the flap, smelling faintly of snow and neighbour smoke. Beyond the canvas, the other camp quiets too. The freezing night remains, but it is no longer faced by one family alone. By the time the dark begins to thin, the river is no longer only a sound beyond the wagon. It has become a decision waiting in the cold. The family does not rise all at once. No one in a freezing wagon rises like a cheerful rooster in a farmyard painting. They surface slowly, unwillingly, piece by piece, from quilts that have taken all night to become almost warm. The youngest child coughs once, then settles. The mother touches her forehead. Still warm, but not alarming. The boy wakes with one eye open and asks whether the river has gone away. The father answers no. Rivers rarely take hints. Outside, dawn is pale and hard. Snow lies in a thin crust along the bank and on the wagon cover. where the father knocks it loose with careful taps before it can melt into the canvas. The fire is ash, but a few coals survive beneath it, red and stubborn. The oxen stand with snow dusted along their backs. Their breath rises steadily. The neighbouring wagons begin to stir one by one, canvas flaps lifting, figures emerging wrapped in shawls, coats, blankets, and the particular expression of people who have slept badly but remain technically alive. The river crossing waits below, in daylight. It looks less mysterious but not more comforting. The water runs dark between shelves of ice at the edges. Stones show in places, slick and rounded. The current moves faster near the centre, where the surface wrinkles and pulls. The bank on the far side rises through mud, half frozen, half churned by earlier wagons. A trail climbs from it into low brush and open ground beyond. That is the way forward. Of course it is. The way forward often has the decency to look inconvenient. River crossings were among the most dangerous and difficult moments on many overland routes. Families had to judge depth, current, bottom conditions, weather, animal strength, wagon weight, and whether supplies could be kept dry. Some crossings were forded. Others required ferries, rafts, ropes, or unloading wagons. A poor decision could soak bedding and food, damage the wagon, injure animals, or cost lives. Cold weather made every risk sharper, because wet clothing and wet bedding could become threats long after the wheels left the water. The father walks down to the bank with several men from nearby wagons. You follow their careful steps through frost that crunches underfoot. They stand with arms folded, looking at the river as if it might confess its secrets out of embarrassment. One man throws a stick into the current and watches how quickly it moves. Another probes the near edge with a long pole. A third says his cousin crossed worse water in Illinois. This may be true, but the river does not appear impressed by Illinois. The women stand farther back near the wagons, watching both the men and the children. The mother keeps the youngest wrapped in a shawl, letting her breathe the cold air only briefly. The older girl helps pack bedding tighter and lift anything vulnerable from the wagon floor. Food sacks must be secured, blankets must be raised, clothing bundles must be wrapped. If they cross, water splashing into the wagon bed could undo half the work of the night. A curious custom among some travellers was to toss a handful of grass, bark, or even a crust of bread into the water and watch whether it spun, sank, or drifted smoothly. People use such signs to judge current, but sometimes the gesture also carried a flavour of offering, as if the river were being asked politely to behave. It is easy to smile at that. It is also easy to understand it when your children, flower, quilts, and future are all sitting on four wheels above cold water. The debate begins softly, then grows. One man thinks they should wait until the sun climbs and softens the ice at the bank. Another says waiting will make the mud worse. Someone suggests sending an empty wagon first. Someone else says no wagon is truly empty unless the family has already thrown away everything they regret bringing, which, given the state of the trail, may be emotionally complicated. The father listens more than he speaks. He watches the water. He watches the oxen. He watches the sky. Several academics have debated how emigrants balanced group advice against individual family judgment at crossings like this. A wagon train could offer expertise, labour, and courage, but group pressure could also push families into risks they might not have chosen alone. No one wanted to be the family that delayed everyone. No one wanted to appear timid. Yet a wet wagon did not care about pride. A drowned fire kit did not admire bravery. A flour sack soaked through by icy water didn't say, "Well, at least we were bold." The father returns to the wagon and speaks quietly with the mother. Their words are low, but you can hear the shape of the decision. The child has coughed. The bedding must stay dry. The animals are tired but steady. The weather may worsen later. The river may not drop by waiting. Another party crossed yesterday, judging by the ruts. The far bank looks ugly, but passable with help. The mother does not say yes at once. She looks at the river, then at the wagon, then at the children. Practical intelligence moves across her face. If they cross, she must keep the children still. If they wait, she must keep them warm another day beside damp air. If they unload, the work will be long and wet. If they do not unload, the wagon may be too heavy. Every option is a door with cold air behind it. They decide to lighten the wagon slightly. Not everything. There's not time, and the water does not look deep enough to justify fully unloading. But some goods are shifted. A chest is carried higher and tied. Bedding is rolled tight and wrapped. The flour sacks are raised on boxes. The skillet and tools are wedged where they will not slide. The mother ties the youngest child to her with a shawl. Not literally like cargo, but close enough that the child cannot lurch toward the opening if the wagon jolts. The boy is told to sit and hold the side. He asks if he can help drive. The answer is so firmly no that it becomes a complete weather system. The oxen are yoked with slow care. Their hooves crunch at the bank. Steam rises from their nostrils. Men gather on both sides of the team, ready to guide, push, shout, or regret. The father takes his place. Another man walks ahead with a pole, testing the bottom. The mother and children remain inside the wagon, wrapped and silent. The older girl grips the youngest with one arm and the sideboard with the other. The first wheel enters the water. The sound is shocking. A hard splash, then grinding over stones. The oxen hesitate. The father speaks low and steady. The team leans into the yoke. The wagon tilts down the bank, and everyone inside shifts despite trying not to. The boy's eyes widen. The mother's hand clamps over the bedding roll. Cold water slaps the wheels and sprays against the underside of the wagon bed. You feel the whole structure tremble. The current presses sideways and the animals strain. Chains tighten. Wood groans. A man at the front calls the path. Another steadies the rear wheel with a pole, as if a pole and determination can argue with a river. Sometimes they can. Sometimes history is just stubborn people applying leverage in unpleasant places. The wagon reaches the centre. For a breath. The current deepens. Water rises nearly to the wagon bed, but not over it. The mother's face stays calm for the children, though her fingers are white against the side. The youngest coughs once from the cold air. The older girl pulls the shawl closer around her. The boy does not speak. This may be the clearest sign that the moment is serious. Then the oxen find firmer footing. The wagon lurches upward toward the far bank. Mud grips the wheel. Men push. The father calls to the team. The oxen pull, slow and immense, their bodies steaming in the cold. One wheel slips, catches, slips again, then climbs. The wagon rises out of the water with a wet groan, and suddenly the river's behind you. No one cheers loudly. The cold discourages excess drama, but the mother exhales. The boy begins breathing again as though he invented the process. The father pats the lead ox's neck. The neighbouring men smile tiredly, already turning to help the next wagon. The crossing is not the end of danger. Wet wheels may freeze. Mud may harden around the rims. Splashed clothing must be dried. Animals must be checked. Bedding must be inspected. But the family has not soaked the flour. The quilts are dry. The child is warm. The wagon stands on the far side, shivering in every board, but whole. Behind you, the river continues speaking, indifferent and ancient. Ahead, the trail climbs out of the bank and disappears into pale morning light. On the far bank, the family does not celebrate for long because cold has a way of turning victory into another chore. The wagon stands tilted slightly on firmer ground, dripping river water from its wheels. The oxen breathe hard, steam rising from their backs in slow clouds. Mud clings to their legs. The father checks them first, running his hands along the yoke, the lines, the straps, the places where strain might have rubbed skin raw. The animals have pulled the wagon through dark water and slick stones, and now they stand patient and massive, as if they have not just carried the family across a very convincing argument against travel. The mother climbs down carefully, keeping the youngest child wrapped against her side. Her boots meet the frozen mud with a soft crack. She looks first at the wagon bed, then at the canvas, then at the rolled bedding. No water has reached the quilts. The relief on her face is brief, because relief is allowed only a small ration before work resumes. She passes the child to the older girl, who holds her close under the shawl, and begins inspecting the damage that water, sleet, snow, and the long night have left behind. This is where warmth must be repaired. Not created from nothing, not yet repaired. The stormers loosened ties, dampened seams, stiffened leather, chilled boards, and packed mud around the wheels. The river crossing has splashed the lower wagon, soaked parts of the harness, and left icy water hiding in cracks where it will freeze if ignored. A covered wagon suggests because people keep remaking it. Every morning after weather is a morning of small corrections. Pioneer families depended on constant repair because wagons were working vehicles under brutal strain. Wheels loosened, axles cracked, canvas tore, ropes frayed, harness rubbed, and iron fittings bent or worked loose. Travellers carried tools such as axes, augers, hammers, nails, rope, spare pins, grease, and patches when they could. A family that could mend quickly stood a better chance of keeping moving. A family that could not might spend a cold day beside the trail watching others roll on. The father kneels near the wheel, mud is packed thick around the rim and spokes. If it freezes hard, the wheel may turn badly later or shed chunks that damage something else. He uses a stick, then a small tool, scraping away the cold mass. Each piece drops with a wet thud. His fingers are clumsy again, reddened by water and cold. He pauses to blow into them, then continues. The boy hovers nearby, eager to help and mostly in the way, which is the traditional apprenticeship stage. The mother turns to the canvas. Along one side, a tire stretched during the storm. The cover sags where snow had gathered before dawn. She pulls the fabric tight while the older girl holds the loose rope. The canvas is cold under their hands, stiff and damp at the lower edge. A small tear near one seam is widened enough to matter. It is not dramatic. No great rip from top to bottom. Just a narrow opening where wind will find its entrance tonight if no one stops it now. She takes out a patch from an old flour sack. A bit of flour sackcloth could have many lives on the trail. It might wrap food, strain liquid, patch clothing, cover a child's head, cushion a cup, or mend canvas. Some sacks even carried printed mill names or simple designs, and later generations made quilts from such fabric when it was still usable. Out here, cloth is never merely cloth. It is a future solution waiting for the right problem. The mother folds the patch and presses it over the tier. The father, finished for the moment with the wheel, brings a needle heavy enough for canvas work and a length of strong thread. The mother's hands are steadier, so she sews while he holds the fabric against the wagon bow. The needle resists, the canvas resists, the cold resists. Everything resists, really. If objects had opinions, the 19th century would be one long argument, a curious bit of trail practicality, almost comic from a comfortable distance, involved using tallow, grease, or wax to rub over seams, threads, or small patched areas to help shed water. It was not a perfect waterproofing, and it could smell strong or attract dirt, but it might slow moisture. Imagine carefully sacrificing a little precious fat to persuade your wagon not to leak on your children. It is both sensible and slightly rude of the wagon to require seasoning. The mother finishes the rough stitch. It is not pretty. It is not meant to be. She rubs a tiny amount of grease across the thread and patch, then presses the cloth flat. The older girl watches closely, memorizing the method. The boy, now given a safer task, gathers small bits of brush and dry stems from higher ground. The youngest child, wrapped in shawls, sits on a box near the wagon and looks offended by mourning. People who study daily life on the trail still discuss whether repair work has been overshadowed by the larger drama of migration. The answer seems obvious once you stand here among wet wheels and stiff canvas. Routes, maps, and destinations matter. Of course, but survival often turned on whether someone could patch a tear before the next freezing night, dry a boot before it hardened, or mend a harness before an animal's sore became serious. Repair was not background. Repair was momentum. The father inspects the harness. Leather straps have taken water at the crossing. If left wet and then frozen, they can stiffen, crack, or rub badly. He wipes them with an old cloth, works them between his hands, and hangs part of the harness where the weak morning sun can reach. The sun is pale, but it is something. The mother spreads damp mittens near the revived coals, not too close, never too close. The older girl turns them after a while so the warmth reaches both sides. Inside the wagon, the bedding is checked again. The quilts are dry, but the underside of one coat feels damp from being near the seam overnight. The mother shakes it out and lays it over a wagon bowl where air can move around it. The boy finds the spoon at last, lodged under a sack, apparently finished with its career in weather prophecy. It is wiped and put away. One small mystery solved, 1,000 remaining. Boots receive attention next. Wet leather can become stiff as board in the cold. The father scrapes mud from soles. The mother checks the children's shoes, pushing fingers inside to feel for dampness. The boy's left boot is wet near the toe. Naturally, he claims he did not notice. This is believable only if one has never met feet. A twist of dry cloth is tucked inside to absorb what it can. He is told to stay near the fire while it dries. He accepts this punishment bravely. The family also improves the wagon's sleeping space. The father cuts a few dry reeds and grasses from a sheltered patch above the bank, shaking away snow and damp. They are not ideal, but placed beneath the ground cloth and under part of the bedding, they will create a little more separation from the cold boards. The mother judges them, removes the wettest pieces, and accepts the rest. Comfort does not arrive proudly. It arrives in bundles of questionable grass and says, "This will do." You can feel the camp slowly reordering itself after the chaos of storm and crossing. Neighbouring families do the same. A man hammers at a loose wagon part. A woman spreads blankets across a bush. Children carry sticks. Someone laughs at a mule that has planted its feet and refuses to participate in optimism. Smoke rises from several small fires, thin and blue against the pale sky. The repaired canvas no longer sags. The wheel is cleaner. The harness dries by degrees. The bedding is shaken, aired, folded, and guarded. The family has taken the night's damage and answered it with hands, tools, cloth, grease, patience, and mild irritation, which may be one of humanity's most durable fuels. Soon the wagon will roll again, not far perhaps, not quickly, but forward. And when the next freezing night comes, the patch sewn this morning, the dried boot, the tightened rope, and the grass tucked beneath the bedding may each add a little protection. Small repairs become future warmth. Small warmth becomes sleep. Sleep becomes strength. The trail continues because someone keeps mending what the trail takes apart. The wagon moves on through the pale morning, but the night does not leave at once. It clings to everything. It stays in the damp edge of the patched canvas, in the stiff straps drying near the wagon side, in the boy's wet boot now stuffed with cloth, in the youngest child's softened cough, in the mother's tired eyes, and in the father's hands, still red from rope, water, and cold. Even after the river is behind you, even after the wheels begin turning over the frozen road, the memory of the night travels with the family like another bundle tied beneath the canvas. By afternoon, the sky clears. The world looks almost innocent, which is a rude habit of weather. Snow shines along the low ground. Bare branches hold silver beads of meltwater. The oxen pull steadily, their breath fading as the day warms slightly. Other wagons creak nearby, and voices return in small measures. Someone jokes about the crossing. Someone complains about mud. Someone says tomorrow will be easier, proving once again that humans are brave, foolish, or both. But as evening approaches again, the old unease gathers. The family chooses a camp farther from the river this time, on higher ground where the air feels drier. There is scrub nearby for fuel, and a shallow hollow that breaks the wind. The wagon is turned with more care than before. Canvas ropes are checked early. Bedding is aired before frost can form. The repaired seam is inspected with the seriousness normally reserved for legal documents and suspicious pies. The day's travel has ended, but the mind continues moving. That is the problem with a hard night. It teaches the body to listen too closely. After supper, as the fire settles and the children climb back into the wagon, sounds become sharper. A wolf or coyote calls somewhere far off. A thin rising cry that slips through the cold air and seems to hang above the camp. The youngest child freezes beneath her shawl. The boy, eager to appear brave, says it sounded small. This is not convincing. The older girl says nothing, but her hand tightens on the quilt. Predators were part of the soundscape of the trail, though the greatest threats to emigrants were often disease, accidents, weather, hunger, and animal loss rather than dramatic attacks. Wolves, coyotes, and other animals might approach camps out of curiosity, hunger, or interest in livestock and scraps. Their calls could unsettle exhausted families, especially children. A howl in open country does not need to be close to feel personal. Darkness handles the rest. You settle inside the wagon as the family gathers under the quilts. The canvas above you glows faintly from the fire outside. The air smells of smoke, wool, dried grass under bedding, and warm cornmeal. The spoon has been properly secured tonight, perhaps after being found guilty of excessive drama. Still, new sounds take its place. The wagon creaks when the wind changes. A rope taps once against the sideboard. A horse from another camp snorts and stamps. Farther away, a branch cracks in the cold. The boy lifts his head. What was that? Wood, the father says. A moment later, another sound. What was that? More wood. The boy considers this. The father adds that trees are very talkative after dark. The boy almost laughs, then decides to remain alert in case the trees become dangerous. A small belief carried by some rural families held that hearing an owl near camp foretold a death, a storm, or a visitor. Sometimes it foretold only an owl, which is honestly enough. Still, when a low hoot drifts across a freezing camp, you can understand why people wrapped in quilts under thin canvas might feel old superstition stir. Night gives every sound a longer shadow. The mother begins a prayer softly, not as a performance, but as a rhythm for the children. Her words are familiar enough that the older girl mouths some of them without opening her eyes. The boy lies still. The youngest child listens, thumb near her mouth, curls tucked under her cap. The prayer does several things at once. It asks protection. It marks the end of the day. It gives the mind a path to follow away from fear. It also fills the silence just enough that the wolves seem farther off. Faith on the trail was often woven into daily survival rather than set apart from it. Families prayed before meals, during illness, at burials, in storms, and before dangerous crossings, some carried Bibles, hymn books, or small devotional texts. Others relied on remembered verses and songs. Belief did not remove hardship, but it gave people language for endurance when practical measures had reached their edge. After all, once the knots are tied, the fire banked, the children tucked, and the animals checked, what remains is waiting. Prayer gives waiting a shape. The father does not speak much, but when the mother finishes, he adds a simple Amen. Then he listens. His head rests near the opening, one hand close to his coat, ready if the animals stir. The mother lies near the children, but her eyes remain open. The older girl has learned this pattern. Adults pretend sleep is near, but their bodies remain in conversation with the night. Historians have explored whether fear on the trail was recorded openly or softened by later memory. Diaries could be plain about death and disaster, yet private fear often appears indirectly, through mentions of poor sleep, nervous animals, bad dreams, or prayers offered in storm. People did not always write, "I was afraid." Sometimes they wrote that the wolves howled all night, or that the wind shook the wagon, or that mother did not sleep. The feeling is there, tucked between the lines like a child under a quilt. The sounds continue, canvas breathing, oxen shifting, fire settling into ash, a distant howl answered by another. The youngest child asked if wolves can open wagon flaps. The mother says no, not unless they have learned manners and fingers. The boy says wolves do not have fingers. The father says that is why they make poor seamstresses. The older girl makes a small sleepy sound that might be laughter. Fear loosens a little, not gone, just made smaller by absurdity. You feel that too. Gentle sarcasm has survived a remarkable number of historical emergencies. It does not warm the feet directly, but it can warm the space between people. A joke says the adults are still thinking clearly. It says the night has not taken command. It says even here, under canvas, with wolves calling and frost gathering, the family can still make the dark look slightly ridiculous. The wind lowers, the fire dims, the howls move farther away, or perhaps the family grows used to them. The wagon becomes a listening chamber. Every breath, every creak, every stir of animal life enters the shared quiet. Fear and faith lie side by side, not enemies exactly, but companions. Fear keeps watch. Faith keeps fear from becoming the whole room. Slowly, the children sleep. The boy's guarded posture softens. The youngest child turns toward the older girl. The mother rests her hand over both of them. The father remains awake a little longer, eyes open in the dark, listening beyond the canvas. Outside, the cold night spreads over the trail, over wagons, animals, fires, and the distant shapes of hills. Inside, the family holds its small circle of warmth. The sounds continue, but they no longer feel like threats alone. They become part of the night's deep breathing, strange and wide and ancient, and beneath them, tucked into the wagon's fragile shelter, you feel how survival is not the absence of fear. It is the ability to lie down beside it, whisper a prayer, share a joke, pull the quilt higher, and remain until morning. The next day carries the family higher, not dramatically at first. The trail rises by slow degrees, winding through open ground where the wind has more room to think. The river is behind you now, but water has left its memory in stiff wheels, damp boot leather, and the mother's watchful habit of touching every bundle that matters. The sky remains pale. The sun gives light without much warmth, like someone offering advice instead of help. The oxen pull steadily. Their hooves break thin crusts of snow and frozen mud. The wagon creaks over ruts hardened by the night's cold. Each jolt travels through the wooden bed, through the sacks and tools, through the patched canvas, through every bone in the family. The youngest child rides wrapped near the centre, quieter than usual but breathing easier. The boy walks for a while beside the wagon, then complains that the ground is made of rocks, ice, and unfairness. The father says the road did not ask to be popular. By afternoon, the trail begins to show what winter can do to those who misjudge it. You pass a scatter of old ashes near a line of brush, then a broken crate half buried in snow. Farther along, a discarded chair lies tipped beside the road, one leg cracked, its seat whitened with frost. It was probably abandoned by another family when weight had to be reduced. Once, perhaps, it stood near a hearth, or at a kitchen table, or beside a bed. Now it sits in the cold like a small wooden warning. The trail is full of such objects: barrels, trunks, books, tools, bedding, furniture, pieces of ordinary life surrendered to distance. One well-known truth of overland migration is that timing mattered intensely. Many emigrant parties tried to leave in spring early enough to cross the plains and mountains before winter weather closed the high passes, but not so early that grass was absent for animals or rivers ran dangerously high. A late start could become a serious danger. Snow in the mountains, exhausted animals, dwindling supplies, and freezing nights could trap families far from shelter. The calendar was not just a measure of days, it was a survival tool. The father studies the sky more often now. He does not say much, but the mother notices. She knows his silences. The older girl notices too, though she keeps her attention on the youngest child, who is half asleep under a shawl. The boy notices nothing except that his boot still feels damp, which, to be fair, is a significant national crisis when the nation is one boy's foot. The wagon train pauses near a low ridge where the road ahead drops into a sheltered valley. Smoke from another camp appears in the distance, thin and grey against the cold air. The men speak together in a loose circle while animals graze what little they can find. You hear fragments. Snow in the hills. A party delayed 2 days ahead. Grass poorer than expected. A wagon broken. Someone ill. Someone turned back. Rumour travels faster than oxen and with far less discipline. A strange tradition among some emigrants was to read abandoned goods as signs, almost like messages left by the trail itself. A feather mattress meant someone had lightened a wagon in desperation. A stove meant the road ahead had punished weight. A child's toy meant either carelessness, tragedy, or a family too tired to search. Of course, sometimes a broken chair was only a broken chair, but on a cold road, human objects become omens very easily. They remind travellers that other people have already bargained with hardship here, and hardship did not bargain gently. The mother looks at the family's own possessions with new calculation. What would go first if they had to lighten the wagon? The extra chest, a blanket too worn to be useful, the small keepsakes tucked under clothing. The question is cruel because every object has already survived earlier decisions. What remains has been defended. Yet winter does not respect sentiment. A quilt may mean warmth. A heavy trunk may mean memory. A sack of flour may mean life. The hierarchy becomes painfully clear when snow comes early. By late afternoon, clouds gather in the west, long and low. The air sharpens again. The animals move more heavily. A few flakes drift across the trail, not falling in earnest yet, just testing the mood. The father decides to stop before dark, earlier than the previous river camp. No one argues. Experience has already been paid for. It might as well be used. The camp forms quickly in the valley's shelter. Wagons draw near one another, not in a perfect circle, but close enough that people can share help if the weather worsens. Fires are started while there is still light. Fuel is gathered with more urgency. Bedding is shaken. Canvas is tightened. The mother puts the youngest child near the fire for warmth, wrapped in a quilt, while she and the older girl prepare supper. The boy is sent to collect dry twigs and returns with several, plus a frozen clump of grass he insists looked useful. It does not, but enthusiasm has been noted. Students of frontier history continue to discuss how strongly famous winter disasters shaped later memories of the trail, sometimes overshadowing the more common pattern of hard but survivable cold. Stories of parties trapped by snow, delayed in mountain passes, or reduced to desperate measures became warnings retold for generations. Yet most families did not live through the most extreme catastrophes. Their survival depended on ordinary discipline, leaving on time, stopping early, guarding supplies, caring for animals, and respecting weather before it became dramatic. Still, those harsher stories hover over the camp like distant weather. People know them in fragments. A company caught too late, families snowed in, animals dying, food running low, travellers cutting loads again and again until the wagon carried almost nothing but the people and what they could not bear to abandon. The details vary in telling, as stories do, but the lesson remains clear enough. Winter punishes delay. As evening settles, the father checks the patched canvas with extra care. The mother stores supplies securely and keeps the bedding away from any damp edge. The older girl warms the youngest child's socks by hand. The boy, after being reminded of last night's sock incident, becomes very serious about foot care, as though he has founded a medical school specializing in toes. A neighbouring man comes by to say the road ahead may climb toward colder ground. Another says there is a sheltered hollow 2 days onward if they make decent progress. Someone else claims the weather will clear because the moon looked sharp last night. Someone replies that the moon has never packed a wagon and should not be trusted with logistics. This is perhaps the best meteorological statement of the evening. The family eats early, cornmeal again, with beans softened from the day before, and a little bacon grease stirred in for strength. The food is plain, but the timing is wise. Warm bellies before dark, dry bedding before frost, animals fed before they grow restless, coals banked while hands can still see what they're doing. Tonight, no one waits for full darkness to teach the lesson twice. Inside the wagon, as the children settle, you feel the difference between fear and preparation. Fear imagines the storm. Preparation tightens the rope. Fear remembers the river. Preparation raises the flour sack. Fear hears stories of winter catching the unready. Preparation stops early, warms socks, checks canvas, and keeps dry cloth ready for seams. The night comes cold, but the campers answered sooner. Fires glow across the valley. Wagons stand closer together. Animals breathe in the dark. Above, clouds cover the stars, but no heavy snow falls yet. The family lies under quilts, tired from travel, sobered by the abandoned chair, the broken crate, the rumours ahead, and the knowledge that timing is a kind of shelter too. You rest among them, listening to the wind move over the valley rim. Somewhere out in the dark, the trail climbs toward colder country. Behind you lie river, storm, repaired canvas, and the lessons of one freezing night. Ahead lies the warning that winter does not need to arrive suddenly to be dangerous. It can come slowly, flake by flake, delay by delay, until every small decision begins to matter. Morning comes as a pale grey line above the valley rim. It does not arrive warmly. That would be too generous. It arrives the way tired travellers often arrive, quietly, stiffly, carrying frost on its coat. The first light settles over the camp and reveals what the night has done. The wagon cover is silvered with crystals. The grass is white and brittle. The ropes are stiff. The coals are buried under ash, still hiding a little red life if someone is patient enough to find it. Around the wheels, frozen mud holds the wagon in shallow ridges, as if the earth has tried to keep it. Inside, the family wakes slowly. You feel the first movement under the quilts, a foot flexing, a shoulder shifting. The boy makes a muffled sound that might be speech, complaint, or a private treaty with his blanket. The youngest child turns against the older girl, and this time she does not cough at once. That small absence changes the air. The mother notices before anyone else. Her hand moves to the child's back, breath steady, forehead warm, not burning. The mother closes her eyes for one quiet moment. Not sleep, not prayer exactly, but relief passing through the body like a soft lamp being lit. The father opens the rear flap. Cold air flows in, and everyone under the quilt reacts as one creature. He looks out across the camp. The sky is clearing. Smoke rises from one neighbouring fire. A man is already scraping frost from a harness. A woman shakes a blanket so stiff it seems to have opinions. Children emerge from wagons wrapped in quilts, blinking like small owls who deeply regret becoming human. Frost was a familiar companion on cold trail mornings, especially in open country or higher ground where night temperatures fell sharply. Canvas could stiffen. Bedding near the edges might grow damp from condensation. Water containers could freeze at the rim. Leather harness became rigid. Metal tools bit the hand with cold. Before travel could begin, families often had to thaw, shake, scrape, loosen, warm, and repack nearly everything they had just used to survive the night. The mother begins with the children, as always, caps adjusted, socks checked, fingers counted, not because she expects any to be missing, but because cold makes parents suspicious of extremities. The boy insists his feet are fine. She checks anyway. This time they're dry. He looks proud, as though he personally negotiated with moisture and won. The youngest child is offered a sip of warmed water from the night's little supply. She drinks, then whispers that she dreamed the wagon was floating. The older girl says it nearly was, yesterday. The boy says his dream had bacon in it. Everyone agrees his dream was better. You climb out into the morning and feel the frost crack softly under your step. The air smells of ash, cold grass, animal breath, and the faint sourness of damp canvas drying too slowly. The fire must be revived before anyone can properly function. The father kneels at the ash bed and stirs carefully. A coal glows. He feeds it dry grass, then twigs, then a bit of saved fuel. Smoke rises first, because apparently breakfast begins with eye irritation. Then flame appears, small and golden. A curious belief in some rural households held that frost patterns on canvas or window glass could foretell the day's weather. Long feather shapes meant wind. Fine crystals meant clear cold. Heavy crust meant more snow. Whether these readings worked consistently is doubtful, but they gave people a way to study the morning closely. And close study itself was useful. If you are staring at frost, you may notice sagging canvas, weak seams, or damp bedding before they become unpleasant surprises. The mother carries bedding out piece by piece, not all of it. Only what can be aired briefly before packing. Quilts are shaken in the weak light. A coat is turned inside out where damp has gathered at the hem. The older girl helps drape a blanket across a bush, where steam rises faintly as sun touches it. The fabric smells of smoke, sleep, and wool. You see little crystals fall from one edge like powdered glass. The father works around the wagon wheels. Frozen mud must be broken loose. If the wheels are forced too soon, something could strain or crack. He taps with a tool, then scrapes. The boy helps. Now entrusted with a stick and strong instructions not to put his fingers near the iron rim, he obeys with the solemnity of a junior engineer. Nearby, the oxen lower their heads to sparse grass, chewing slowly, Their backs steam as the sun reaches them. Some historians still examine how much of trail endurance depended on morning efficiency rather than dramatic courage. It's an excellent question, because here, in the frosty light, survival looks very much like a schedule. Wake, check children, revive fire, warm food, inspect animals, loosen wheels, dry bedding, repack supplies, secure canvas, count tools, drink coffee if fate is kind, move before the day is lost. Courage matters, yes, but routine carries it. Breakfast is simple, a little cornmeal warmed into mush, coffee for the adults, leftover beans if they can be heated without using too much fuel. The smell of food draws people close to the fire. Tin cups warm hands, steam touches faces. The youngest child eats slowly, watched by the mother without seeming to be watched. The boy eats fast enough to threaten the laws of digestion. The father tells him the food is not escaping. The boy looks unconvinced. Around them, the camp brightens into activity. A neighbour calls that the road ahead looks passable. Another says one of his traces needs mending. Someone laughs from the next wagon, a tired laugh but real. The mule from yesterday refuses to move its hindquarters away from a blanket, possibly because it has discovered comfort and intends to keep it. People go around it, which may be exactly what the mule planned. Inside your family's wagon, the mother checks the repaired seam from the day before. It held through the night. The patch is stiff, the stitches rough, but no damp has spread from it. That little square of flour sackcloth has earned respect. She presses it once, then moves on. There's always moving on. The bedding returns to the wagon in a new order. Drier pieces underneath, warmest quilts near the children. The coat that was damp is rolled separately so it can dry more during midday if the sun holds. Food sacks are tightened. The medicine box is placed where it can be reached quickly. The herb packet from Mrs. Bell is tucked inside, saved now among the practical treasures. It may help, it may not, but it represents care, and care has weight. You look back across the morning camp and see how a freezing night reveals itself after it has passed. Not in one great sign, but in small evidence. Red hands, stiff ropes, ash on skirts, frost on whiskers, a child sleeping longer than usual, a mother moving a little slower, a father stretching his back before lifting the yoke, a boy proud of dry socks, a patch that held, a fire coaxed from almost nothing, a wagon ready, somehow, to continue. The family has made it through. That phrase sounds simple, but it contains the whole night. The riverbank decision, the canvas walls, the fire, the layers of wool, the crowded bedding, the cold boards beneath, the supper, the child's cough, the neighbour's embers, the watch in snow, the crossing, the repairs, the prayers, the howls, the frost. Each piece has folded into this morning, where breath rises in the clear air and the trail waits again. Soon the father calls to the oxen. The yoke is set. The children are placed. The mother climbs in with the youngest close beside her. The boy walks for now, full of breakfast and inaccurate confidence. The older girl sits near the rear, watching the blankets, the bundles, the road, and the family all at once. The wheels resist at first to then turn. Frozen mud cracks away. Harness leather creaks. The wagon moves forward into the cold light. Behind it, the night's camp becomes smoke, footprints, crushed frost, and fading warmth. Ahead, the road is pale, hard, and open, and as you travel with them, you understand that morning is not only the end of danger, it is proof that small protections held, proof that tired hands did enough, proof that a family inside canvas, wood, wool, smoke, and shared breath could meet a freezing night and come out moving. The wagon rolls onward, and the cold morning slowly opens into a wider day. Behind you, the valley sinks out of sight. The last smoke from the camp lifts in thin grey threads, then disappears among the low hills. The river crossing is farther back now. The storm is farther back too. Yet nothing is truly left behind on the trail. Hard nights become knowledge. Knowledge becomes habit. Habit becomes the quiet difference between panic and preparation when the next freezing evening comes. You ride near the rear of the wagon, watching the patched canvas stir gently above you. The flower sackcloth sewn into the seam looks plain, almost humble, but your eyes return to it again and again. It held through the night. That small patch carries the whole story of survival in miniature. A tear noticed, a scrap saved, a needle pushed through stiff cloth, a little grease rubbed into thread. Nothing grand, nothing that would make a statue. Yet because of it, children slept drier. The mother sits with the youngest child close against her side. The child's cough has softened into occasional small sounds, no longer sharp enough to tighten every face around her. The older girl watches the road behind, then turns to check the bedding, as if she has inherited some of her mother's private weather sense. The boy walks beside the wagon for a while, poking at frozen ruts with a stick and making important discoveries that no one has requested. The father drives quietly, shoulders set, gaze moving between animal, road, sky, and distant ground. Covered wagons became one of the most familiar symbols of 19th century American migration, but the symbol can make them seem stronger, larger, and more romantic than they were. In daily use, they were working shelters, freight carriers, sick rooms, kitchens in bad weather, children's nests, tool sheds, and uneasy bedrooms on wheels. Their survival value depended less on the wagon alone than on the hands that arranged, repaired, guarded, packed, and repacked everything inside it. The canvas sighs overhead. You remember how it sounded in the sleet when each icy pellet struck above the family like tiny fingers. You remember the cold boards beneath the bedding, the smoke that found every eye, the children tucked into the warm middle, the father standing among the oxen in the dark, the mother holding a coughing child upright while the river breathed outside. You remember the neighbour's herb packet, the borrowed embers, the repaired mitten, the scraped wheel, the boy's wet sock becoming a matter of the household lore. These are not side details. They are the story. A playful little bit of later family memory sometimes turned covered wagons into cosy rolling homes where brave children slept under quilts while moonlight glowed on canvas. There is truth in the quilts and moonlight, of course, but cosy is doing rather heroic work there. The wagon could be smoky, cramped, damp, noisy, cold, and full of objects determined to jab someone in the ribs. Still, people loved what protected them, even imperfectly. Memory has a way of smoothing the boards once the bruises fade. The road ahead bends through open country. Frost melts from the sunny side of low brush. Water drips from twigs into dark soil. The oxen pull at their patient pace, steady enough to make time feel stretched thin. The wheels turn, creak, settle, turn again. Each rotation carries the family farther from one danger and closer to another, because that is travel before comfort has been invented properly. Researchers continue to ask how pioneer families balanced endurance with vulnerability in their own understanding of the journey. Did they see themselves as heroic, desperate, faithful, foolish, practical, chosen, trapped, hopeful? The evidence suggests many things at once. Diaries show complaint and gratitude, fear and stubborn humour, grief and ordinary chores written on the same page. A family could be proud of surviving a freezing night and still wish very deeply for a warm bed, a dry floor, and a roof that did not need tightening with rope. By afternoon, the family stops briefly to rest the animals. The sun has weakened behind clouds, but there is enough light to open the wagon and let air move through. The mother shakes one quilt and turns another. The older girl checks the youngest child's cap. The boy finds the spoon again and is warned not to give it any more ideas. The father examines the wheels, then pats the lead ox with a tired affection that looks almost like apology. You feel the rhythm now. Move, stop, check, mend, warm, eat, sleep, wake, move again. Survival is repetition. Not repetition without meaning, but repetition as meaning. Every night, the same questions return. Is the bedding dry? Are the children warm? Are the animals secure? Is there fuel? Is the canvas tight? Is the food safe? Is anyone ill? Can we cross in the morning? Can we wait? Can we go on? And somehow, through these questions, a life continues. Evening begins to gather once more. Soft and blue along the horizon. The family will soon look for another place to camp. They will avoid low damp ground if they can. They will turn the wagon carefully. They will gather fuel before full dark. They will build the fire from small dry bits, if such treasures can be found. They will cook something plain and warm. They will rub cold hands, check feet, tuck quilts, listen to animals, and watch the sky. The night will come as it always does, carrying cold in its pockets. But they are not the same as they were at the river. They know a little more now. The boy knows wet socks lose arguments. The older girl knows how to brace a child against a draught. The mother knows the repaired seam will hold for at least another night. The father knows the oxen can manage a crossing if guided well and rested after. The family knows that neighbours can become warmth, that embers can be borrowed, that fear can be softened by work, prayer, and the occasional joke about wolves with no fingers. The wagon turns slightly westward, toward a line of dim hills. The canvas catches the last light, no longer white, but cream, grey, smoke-stained, road-worn, patched. It looks fragile because it is. It looks enduring because it has endured. Both truths ride together. You understand now that pioneer survival inside covered wagons was not a single trick. Not one clever secret hidden in old guidebooks. It was a web of small protections, wool layered over linen, quilts tucked round children, food warmed before sleep, coals saved under ash, canvas tightened against sleet, wheels scraped clean after river water, animals guarded, neighbours heard, medicine kept within reach, stories whispered softly enough to calm the dark. The family rolls onward beneath the broad cold sky, not untouched by hardship, not perfectly safe, not romantic in the clean painted sense. They are tired, they are smoky, they are carrying more worry than luggage, yet they are moving, and movement itself is hope made visible. As the first evening star appears, the wagon creaks into the fading light. Inside, the patched cloth waits above the bedding. Outside, the oxen breathe steam into the cooling air. Somewhere ahead, another freezing night is preparing its questions, and this time the family has answers. The trail grows quieter now. The wheels turn more slowly in your mind, each creak softened by distance, each hoofstep settling into the earth like a heartbeat heard through a wall. The wagon becomes smaller beneath the evening sky, not lost, only moving beyond the edge of sight. Its canvas holds the last pale glow of day, then gathers the blue of dusk. You may let the cold loosen its grip now. The fire has been banked. The children are tucked close. The animals stand calm in the dark. The patched seam rests above them, doing its modest work without praise. The mother's hand is still near the quilt. The father still listens once more before sleep. The older girl breathes evenly. The boy, at last, has stopped arguing with his socks, and you, resting here at the edge of the story, can leave them in that small circle of warmth. The road continues, but not loudly. It fades into softer ground, into starlight, into the slow hush of canvas moving with the wind. The river is far behind. The storm has passed into memory. The fear has become only a shadow near the fire, and even that shadow is growing gentle. So breathe slowly. Let the wagon roll on without needing to follow every mile. Let the frost silver the grass outside while the quilts hold their warmth within. Let the oxen doze, the coals glow, the wheels rest, and the family sleep under the careful shelter they have made from cloth, wood, patience, and love. The night is cold, yes, but inside, for now, there is enough warmth, enough quiet, enough safety, and as the last light fades over the old trail, you can drift with it, soft as smoke, calm as falling snow, into rest. Sweet dreams!